And welcome to a brand new life, to a brand new day, all the way from the wastelands of California. My name is Michael, and I am a mere figment of your imagination. I look forward to once again serve you those sounds of salvation. First-time listeners, turn on, tune in, and drop out. This is a very different kind of show, a place where we don't feel so alone. Let us chase away the light no matter what you at home choose to believe. I do admire you for your curiosity. Tonight, I've got a very special treat for all of you. We will revisit the most famous abduction case in ufology. Travis Walton, Mike Rogers, and Jennifer Stein are all here, and they are patiently waiting. There's been a lot of talk about Travis Walton, and if you've been following along, Mike Rogers has been appearing quite frequently here on this program. We also must give Jennifer a warm welcome to the show as well as Mr. Travis Walton. It is their first rodeo after all. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for allowing me into your hearts and into your minds. Here we are again on a night like this. Now, don't forget, if you enjoy the show and want extra bonus content, please feel free to sign up at patreon.com/Michael Decon. Trust me, it's worth it. Now let's get down to brass tacks and bring in all the lovely souls here tonight. Hello out there. Are you guys alive out there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. I'm glad you are here, Mr. Mike Rogers and Jennifer Stein. And of course, we are joined by another special soul out there, Mr. Travis Walton. I believe he is patiently waiting for us on the line. Travis, are you alive out there?
I'm live.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being here, Travis.
Nice to be with you.
Yes, sir. And thank you all for being here. Matter of fact, I'm glad we all get to do this yet again under pale moonlight. Oh, yes. It's very romantic. It really is. It's a very romantic night, boys and girls, I must say. And I want to start this off by saying to you, Travis and Mike, that this is a case that I've always been paying lots of attention to throughout all the years. This is the case that got me into ufology, to be honest with you. This is one of the cases that has always blown my mind. And yes, it's very interesting to finally have both you and Mike here this evening. And Jennifer, when I first talked to Mike here, I told him that I didn't know who you were at first. And then I looked back and I thought, wait a minute, I know exactly who she is. She made that documentary about Zachariah Sitchin, if I recall.
I did. Yeah. Yes, I'm working on a new one now about Zach, like a nice long documentary. That was just a piece I did for his memorial.
Very, very nice. And of course, Mike, thank you for putting this together as always.
Thank you.
Oh, yes. Now, Travis, we first tried to call you earlier, but you dropped the phone.
Yeah, it happens.
Don't worry, I drop the phone all the time. Constantly.
I can vouch for that.
Yeah, Mike knows. And Jennifer, I wanted to start things off here with you and with all of you, really, to give us just a brief introduction about who you guys are. And Jennifer, I want you to take the stage first.
Well, I'm kind of shy, but I'll just say I'm just a housewife from Radnor, Pennsylvania, with a lot of passion and a lot of respect for the people who have been on the front lines of the UFO field for a long time. And that is, of course, Mike Rogers and Travis Walton. Travis has the most profound UFO story. And when I had the opportunity to meet him a number of years ago as a filmmaker, I thought to myself, gee, a documentary has never been made about this. Maybe maybe that's something I could dig into. And actually, I was frightened by the complexity of Travis's story and whether or not I could do a decent job because I didn't want to do a job that disappointed Travis or Mike. And I wanted to gain into a certain extent their respect, and I wanted to also do something that vindicated what they had experienced, and that was really my goal. And on top of that, I would say my other goal was to bring some bit of healing or closure to this event, which in many ways really ruined their lives and I'm sure challenged their relationship from time to time, if you just know a little bit about the story and what they had to go through with Philip Class. So,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I'm not really answering your question, Michael, Deacon. I apologize, but I'm a passionate filmmaker who doesn't like to do a bad job at anything I put my fingers on. So, I took on this project a couple of years ago, I guess about 6 years ago now, and hopefully I achieved my goals. I think for myself I did, and I hope I achieved something that both Mike and Travis are proud of. I mean, it's screened well, of course, as you know. Now it's won something like 28 mainstream film festival awards, and that was just when I put it up in film festivals, which was for about a year. So I think I achieved my goal.
I think you did.
Yes. And Jennifer, if I recall correctly, one of the reasons why you got into this field was because you also had a bit of an experience as well. And
Yes.
back in 1975, the same year this
Correct.
went down.
Correct. Mine was in August 1975. I had an encounter with a rectangle of white light, which did not make sense. It was very close, less than 500 feet from me. It was quite large, like 80, 90 feet long and about 5 feet high. It was undulating white light at 5:30 in the morning before it was light out, although it didn't light anything up. It was in right outside my bedroom window where I lived with my parents in Culpsville, Pennsylvania. And this event stayed in my gray box for like almost 25 years until I ran into somebody. I'd planned to visit with this fellow, this friend of mine. We had traveled in a musical roadshow for a year together, and I went to visit him in Hawaii, and we were literally like smoking cigarettes and drinking wine and cooking dinner. And he turned to me and said, you have to tell me what happened when we had that UFO experience. And I was like 45 at the time, and I went, what? What are you talking about? I was like, I remember my part of the story. I don't remember what you remember, and you go write it down. Don't even tell me. Don't mess with my memory. And once he explained on paper with drawings the same thing I had experienced, Michael, that's what changed my life.
Right.
I realized at that point I could either, it's kind of like when people are diagnosed with cancer, right? They decide that they're going to give themselves permission in ways that they never did before. And I lived a very conservative life in what we call the main line of Philadelphia. And to talk about UFOs was just not something I did in my circle of friends. And stepping into this field would mean alienating myself and from family and friends and relatives and social connections and boards that I sat on and charities that I ran and all sorts of things. But I felt that my activism and my professionalism could do greater good beginning to unpack this reality that there weren't a lot of answers for. And I knew it took really brave people to step forward. And I just felt like if I was going to make my life matter and do something of importance, that I should step forward. And many things changed. I became very good friends with Zachariah Sitchin, and I rekindled my relationship with Edgar Mitchell, and I went to UFO conferences, and I read books, and I started doing documentaries. And Travis was maybe my third or fourth on this topic generally. And I've never looked back. I've been very grateful that I made that decision.
And in terms of your family, what was their initial reaction to this interest of yours? I'm curious.
Well, initial and still, I would say.
Yes.
I am, though, to a certain extent, the laughing stock of
Oh, no.
family events. And,
No.
people come by and tease me and show me pictures and send me silly emails. And I have to allow that because at some point they will have their own realizations, just like we all do as we mature in life. I think this is we all have these pearls that we polish, in our ways that we become our own bodhisattvas and our own spiritual ways. And I think this is mine. And I have to allow them their pleasure. And when they're really ready for a good, serious conversation, they'll come to me. And many of them have, but they always come to me alone, privately. Right? They never discuss it in public when we're at like a family Passover dinner or something, right? Subject never comes up except they tease me. But then they'll say, "Can you meet me privately for lunch?" I can't tell you how many people I have had from very conservative backgrounds, heads of law firms, PhDs, doctors, university professors call me and say, "Can you come for lunch? Can we talk?" And I'll meet them, and like 4 hours go by and they bare their soul to me just because they want to tell somebody something, and I'm the only person they know they can tell. And I just say, "Well, thank you." And I give them credit for being brave enough to acknowledge that this was real, even though people who were with them now deny that they had a sighting or they had this experience or they had this abduction. I just say, you're brave, and we all have to digest this. And it's not going to be easy for humanity to do this, but we need to have courage. And I get strength from seeing someone like Travis again and again and again, and like Mike and all the boys in the crew, do the same thing, stand up and tell their story. And the story hasn't changed over 45 years almost. This is the 44th anniversary.
Wild.
This coming weekend. November 5th, I think, is next Wednesday. So that
3 days from now.
3 days from now, it'll be 44 years. And one of the reasons I made this film, Michael, was that Travis and Mike and other boys who were in the crew can have reunions and have screenings and participate in conferences, or even do something up in Sholo or Phoenix or something, and remind people, yeah, this was a real event. Just like Roswell, every year has this huge conference, right, that goes on and thousands of people show up. They do it because this was a true story in Roswell. And the more you dig, the more pieces of the story continue to come out. And when it's a real story, that's when you know it is. That's something Stanton used to say too, and Lee Spiegel. The more you dig, the more you find.
Very interesting. And of course, Mike and Travis, I think we both know a bit about both of you, but I definitely just still want to ask you guys just who is Mike Rogers now, before we travel into the past here. Mike, who are you nowadays?
Well, I'm the same guy, but
Same man.
That's right. But I'm 72 years old now. I was 28 back then.
Right.
And I've progressed in certain ways, and so has Travis. But I had my own first hosted radio show last night on KGRA. Jennifer was there for a few minutes, and so was Travis.
It was great.
Yeah. And they said it was real good. In fact, Bill came back on afterwards and told me that it had an awful lot of listeners. In fact, he said it had already got the ratings, and it had come across as number 5 in the ratings. I don't know what that means exactly, because I've never, really experienced myself with the ratings, but he seemed to think it did really good. And so I guess I'll hear more about that on Monday. But yeah, that show was pretty good. It's 2 hours. And
excellent.
Yes, we didn't do what I would normally do with the show, which I will start doing next Friday. It's Friday nights on KGRA between 10 and 12 midnight on Eastern, and here in the mountain it's 8 to 10, or actually a 7 to 9 is what it is actually. our time doesn't change. Other times around the country will change tomorrow, but yeah, Mountain Standard Time is
Oh, Lord.
always been for a long time, at least in Arizona, Mountain Standard Time. And anyway, that's me. I have an awful lot to say. I hope I do, because I got the show to do weekly now. But anyway, there I am, and let's hear from Travis.
Yeah, Travis, let's definitely talk to you now here. And of course, Travis, I'm curious, what are you up to nowadays?
Well, I I like to think of myself as being the same guy.
Right.
Just an ordinary guy. And I'm a father and grandfather, but it changed me profoundly. And I initially tried to run away from it. Initially refusing to do interviews and media made them say, well, what's he got to hide? Mm-hmm. So I came out and did interviews, and then they said, oh, he's a publicity seeker. So damned if you do and damned if you don't. But right. I really felt obligated to come out and rebut some of the most absurd kinds of crap that was thrown at us. Things that if they'd have just done an ounce of research, they would have realized that that's not possible. It's just totally contrary to the facts of the case. I one of my favorite sayings back then was, get the facts first. Is that too much to ask?
Nice.
But truly, people make up their minds, come up with a theory, and then gather points that they think support their theory.
Yeah, but they have to go back and grab them, don't they?
You gather the facts and then see what sort of theory that leads you to formulate.
Yes, and Travis, we will go into what the skeptics said at the very end of this program. Well, not the very end, but at the end of this sort of segment here that we will conduct. And before we go back in time here, I wanted to ask all of you if your Halloween was okay. Did you pass out candy? Did any of you dress up? What's going on with Halloween? Jennifer, let's start with you first.
I always put a nice sign by my front door that basically says I can't come to the door because I'm usually upstairs editing or whatever, and I don't want to be I don't want to be interrupted all night by people knocking at the door. And I don't have that many kids that come now. So I just refill the candy bowl because inevitably whoever comes dumps the whole candy bowl. Right. Right. So yeah. I just put a sign that says, please leave some for the next person. And they don't. So I just fill it throughout the night. But we had a pretty good blow of a storm here with lots of trees down. So the early part of the evening was fine. And the later part, I was out there grabbing everything and bringing it in because it was about to blow all over the yard. But I spent it editing.
Nice. Not bad. I only had one trick-or-treater, by the way. And Mike, what about you?
Well, my Halloween was pretty uneventful because my ex broke out my porch light like 8 or 10 years ago. And so, and she broke it in a way that it can't be fixed really without replacing the entire thing. And so it's remained out. And that really doesn't work for anything except Halloween. And on Halloween, people don't come.
Mike.
Not too many.
There's nothing scarier than reality, right?
That's exactly right.
And Travis, what about you? Was your Halloween okay?
Well, I think Halloween has changed. I think trick-or-treating is a lot less popular than it used to be. They do these trick-or-trunk, and, they have little Halloween parties and get-togethers here and there. And, just going door to door is a lot less popular. But I did see one group, but they didn't come to my house. Maybe it was because it was too scary looking. I don't know. But no trick-or-treats. I had plenty of candy to hand out, but nobody came.
Yeah, it's interesting how much Halloween has changed in America compared to back like in the early 2000s, late 90s. The streets used to be filled with kids, and not anymore.
Yeah,
Oh man, when I was a kid,
this
we
same
went
house,
out and
people would
gathered
come
candy
by
all
and
night.
just nonstop streaming. Sometimes they'd keep doing it late into the night, way past 9 o'clock, past midnight, but not anymore.
Yep, things have changed. Well, gentlemen, I definitely want to take a little trip through time now. Now, Travis and Mike, you two gentlemen were very green and wide-eyed back in 1975 when all this went down. I believe Travis must have been 21, 22 years old, right?
Yeah, I was 22.
Yeah, you were 22.
And I was 28.
And you were 28. My goodness. Very, very interesting.
Yeah, we were green.
You guys were
well,
very
Mike
green.
was the boss. He'd had years of experience with Forest Service contracting, and the rest of us. I mean, one of the guys, Dwayne Smith, he'd only been on the job 3 days, and another, Steve Pierce, he was really too young for the job, but he, lied to Mike about how old he was. And,
Yeah, he was only 17.
big for his age and got the job. He's a good worker.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
all these people are pretty colorful characters anymore. There's two of us that aren't here anymore. Two of us have passed away. I was the oldest. I'm still here, but
yeah, I was just about to ask you about the other crew members that were there that night. So two of them passed.
Yes. Yeah, Alan Dallas died here. Oh gosh, it's been like 7 years ago. Dwayne Smith died. He was over in Texas. You know more about that than I do, Travis.
Yeah, I had a friend that was a private detective locate him for me because he had just disappeared and couldn't find him. But I talked to him and said, hey, I'd like you to come out with me. And I did an interview, which I taped. And he said, yeah, okay, I'll do that. I just want to do some cosmetic dentistry before I do any appearances. And next thing I knew, he passed away on Thanksgiving.
Bummer. By the way, I do have a photograph of all you guys in the chat room now, and I'm looking at Mike, and man, Mike, you're so young, and so is Travis. My goodness.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't look like that now.
Well, John
I'm even better looking now.
had just gotten out of the Navy, and Dwayne Smith had just gotten out of the Air Force.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
John Gillette had just gotten out of the Navy.
That's what I said.
When you see photographs of yourself from that sort of when that early gig back then in 75, what is your initial reaction? Is it good? Is it bad? What's on your mind? Mike, go ahead.
Oh, wow. Well, you're talking about me looking way back then?
Yes, sir.
Well, I have so many thoughts on that. I don't know where to start. Give me something specific.
Well, when you look back at this photograph of yourself in your prime, I guess you could say your prime years here, Mike, and you're seeing yourself wearing the hard hat, do you miss those days at all, Mike?
I miss all of
Mike,
it.
Mike doesn't want to boast on himself, but he entered some of these logging festivals, and he did exceptionally well with some rather unusual skills, axe throwing and log toss, which takes a tremendous amount of strength.
Damn, Mike was strong.
I'll even add to that. Mike and I have, of course, become friends. And since I do video, Mike sent me a video he made of, he worked professionally as a tree man and a logger all of his life. And he was able to take very difficult trees near or too close to houses, and he could maneuver them in a way and take them down in the most cost-effective and simple way. In some cases, even like ricocheting the tree. So he cut off a major part of it and jump it over the house so it wouldn't land on the house, but fly out off in the distance.
Yeah.
And it was like literally, I was working out one day watching this video, like literally dropping the weights going, oh my gosh, what is he doing? And of course, it was amazing. So he's quite an accomplished tree man.
You guys are making me feel kind of self-conscious.
It's true. You really know your stuff when it comes to trees.
Well, Mike was a strong man. Still is, I'm sure.
Mike and I entered an amateur boxing event after that happened, and Mike was unbeaten, and he did really, really well.
Travis did really good too. I think you were only beaten once, right? Barely.
Well, it ended in a draw, but I could argue about that, but that's what the judges said.
Wow, I never knew that about both of you. Interesting.
Yeah, we boxed for 2 years, I think, wasn't it?
The first 4 I won by knockout, which means literally knocking them off their feet.
Right.
But it was amateur, guys that just probably hadn't done any more boxing than we had. Mike and I had done martial arts, jiu-jitsu, karate, all those kinds of things too.
Budokan jiu-jitsu.
Wow, I had no idea. Very, very interesting.
We
very
were
cool.
fierce guys. I mean,
I studied Taekwondo. I got to be a brown belt in Taekwondo.
Jennifer kicking guys over there. Look at
that. Well, the various schools, instructors of different styles would come and go, so they didn't hang around long enough for us to go very far with it. So we were switching styles all the time.
Travis and I both. He's being self-conscious. We both advanced pretty close to the top. We really don't like to brag too much about that karate, jiu-jitsu stuff. I don't even like to say much about boxing, actually.
Well, I'm a big fan of boxing and jiu-jitsu and all these things. I've been in martial arts and boxing basically my entire life, and I love it. And I have to do it, to be honest with you, because naturally I'm a violent person, to be completely honest with all of you out there.
Oh, really?
So I definitely have to train and get hit in the face every now and then. So it's true.
Well, I've had a lot of fist fights, street fights. Not a lot, but 3 or 4, I guess.
I'm still getting in them, Mike.
What's that?
I said I'm still getting in those.
Oh, really? Have you ever boxed, actually?
Of course, in the ring. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Oh,
cool.
yeah.
Well, we got ourselves a little circle here.
I know the sweet science. Oh, yes. And so now, gentlemen, I definitely want you guys to take us back to that night in 1975 when all of this went down. And again, you guys were in your prime. You guys were ready to take on the world. And then this happens. What is your recollection about that evening? Let's start with you, Travis.
Well, it was just long, hard days working, the whole crew. One thing that is kind of that the observers have, they treated us like a group of buddies that conspired, and that wasn't the situation at all. Like I said, one of the guys had only been on the job 3 days. And we had our differences there. Mike and I had both been in fights with Alan. He was rather hard to get along with. He was a hot-tempered sort of a guy. And that scene in the movie where he drops a tree nearly on me was actually happened. So we weren't a group of buddies, and just,
you guys were colleagues.
Just give each other a hard time. It was just the friendly sort of harassing back and forth.
Okay, typical, normal.
A couple of guys on the crew weren't anything. They were just good workers and got along with everybody. But Alan Dallas was the only hothead and the only one Travis and I had actually fought with before. There's some very interesting stories about that nobody's ever heard. One particular story with Alan Dallas is that one day I went out to my car. It wasn't my car, it was my brother's car, and noticed that the hood was open. And we found that these headers, it was a racing car, and these special headers were gone. And I didn't know for certain, but I pretty was sure I knew who it was. So Travis and I and my brother took off in my van. Or I think it was, no, my brother wasn't there, but it was Travis and I and somebody. Anyway, we went looking for Alan, and we found him in town there. And he automatically kind of got an idea of what we were trying to do. So he got in his car and took off. Yeah, he had one other fellow with him, and we chased him through town there. And finally, Alan pulled up in this one place, and before we could even get parked, he'd gotten out and gone in this house. And so I got out and I went out there to near the front door, or where this guy lived. We didn't know who lived there. And Alan came out with these headers, and he threw them at my feet, and was cursing me. I can't remember what he called me, but
nothing good.
No, and he called me some things that I didn't like too much, and so I hit him, and it went from there. And he was acting so big and tough before then, and that seemed to cool him down. And the interesting part about that was that after I pretty much kicked his butt and we left, it was later on that night, Alan came to my house and said, "Man, I need that job. Can I have my job back?" I says, well, I didn't fire you.
That's so funny.
So the next day he was at work.
Well, the significance of the friction with Alan has to do with his initial trouble with the polygraph examiner.
Oh.
His mom was feeding him this idea that they were going to hang him for my murder, because at that point my body had not been recovered. And when they started questioning him about, have you ever considered harming Travis or hurting him? Well, he had, we'd gotten a fight there in Mike's backyard, and right before work, the whole crew had witnessed it. So he was going to be unable to say, no, I never considered harming Travis. And so he figured that he was going to be the scapegoat for my murder. And so he just threw a fit and, walked out on his polygraph test. He did come back and finish it with the same, state police examiner, and passed with flying colors. But initially,
that was in '93.
That was the issue. He was going to get hung for killing me.
Yeah. We'll go over that in a moment here. We definitely jumped around just a tiny bit. And Mike, you were the driver that night, that evening, yes, I should say, right?
Yes, I sure was. And, he started out the story there. Normally, you see, Travis and I have been on tour before. We actually did that for several years. And I would normally start out, talking about it first, because that seemed to be the best order, and then he would take over later. Anyway, so what I'll do is just kind of like start from the beginning, which he started to do. We were working that day. I had 6 men working for me, and when we, left to go to work, we had to pick everybody up. We had 7 people in a truck, so there was 4 guys crowded in the back seat. It was an international crew cab, so it wasn't all that crowded, but we had about as many people in there as we could get. And Dwayne Smith was a 6'4", I believe, so he was kind of like extra crowding in the back. But anyway.
I think he was 6'5".
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, he was very tall.
Yeah, tall guy.
Had the movie Fire in the Sky cut out his character for that reason, I think. But anyway, we headed out that day after work, and we'd put in an awful long day. I mean, it was hard work, and I think we put in about 10 hours that day. We were behind on the contract, and we were trying to catch it up. So we're heading out, and everybody's really tired. We get up the road a ways, and they see a light. I saw it too, but I got to keep my eyes on this road, because it wasn't really a road. It was more like a trail. It was like had humps of dirt plowed up in it by bulldozers, because the road was originally a logging road, and it was closed by bulldozers. And so even to get into that area, we had to shovel out at least one side of them. So We had to be very careful about going around it just that way, because otherwise we'd get hung up and then we'd be in trouble. And that particular night, we come around a group of trees and broke into a clearing, and all of a sudden Travis yells out, "Stop the truck!" And I couldn't see at that point what they were looking at, because by now this thing was not only, I mean, we couldn't see it until we got into that clearing, but then I couldn't see it even then, because it was up the hill. It was like an incline to where this thing was up above the ground 15 or 20 feet, and the ground itself was a good 15 or 20 feet or 30 feet higher than the truck. So I had to turn the truck off, and Travis is already walking very quickly up that way. At first, I thought everybody was going to get out. I looked at Alan, and Alan just had big, wide eyes because he could see what it was. And the eyes weren't getting out the other side. Nobody got out but Travis. And so we watched him, and I had to see what it was. So, like I say, I'd already turned off the truck, and then I leaned over, and then I saw it for the first time, and I was extremely amazed by what I saw. And my first reaction was not fear, because it was really quite pretty. It was a mechanical looking thing. I mean, a UFO, a flying saucer with the traditional pipe pan, lip to lip. There was looked like there might have been somewhat of a dome on top, and it was lighted, and it was dark by this time.
Yes, and Mike, I'm sorry to cut you off, but to add more context to the story, it was around 6 p.m. if I recall correctly, so it was kind of dark, but you had a pretty good view, right?
It wasn't totally dark, but it almost was totally dark. I guess you call that twilight.
Right.
And parts of it were glowing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, part of the UFO was glowing, and by the time Travis got up there, it was lighting up him, and actually, we're lighting up the truck, but it was a rather soft glow, and which just made it kind of all the more eerie. It's funny that Halloween was just 2 nights ago. I guess really, my mind goes back to Halloween like that, because this happened just a few days after Halloween.
Right.
All right.
And we are in November. It's almost November 5th, Mike.
Yes.
When it happened.
3 days from now. That's right.
Crazy.
And I mean, for us, when it happened, it was just past Halloween, for real. And of course, it was that time of year. It was cold, especially after the sun went down, and it was just kind of freezing. That particular night, there wasn't much of a breeze, kind of calm. But Travis stood there looking up at this thing, and I could tell it was just like right above him. I mean, I could tell that too. You could see that he was right there. It was getting as close as he could. There was a logging slash pile right there in front of him. It could prevent him from going any further. And he would look back at the truck once, I believe, and he'd look he would look back like saying, you could just see in his eyes, what am I doing here? Maybe I shouldn't be doing this.
Right.
And he crouched down right after that. He crouched down kind of forward, like there was a log sticking out of this pile. This debris pile was pushed up logging debris. So there was some pretty good sized pieces of log in there. And it was a large pile. I mean, and so he crouched down kind of like as if he was needing to hide from behind this log. And then just a few seconds later, he stood up. Now, by this time, everybody in the truck is yelling at him, and the thing starts moving too. That's what really scared us and what got him going. And it wasn't just it moving; it was also because it started making sounds, louder sounds. When we first pulled up there, I could hear a little bit of something, but when we were quiet there, or as quiet as we could, with everybody yelling at him, it started making a lot more noise and very strange noises. And besides that, and what really got us was this rumble that I could feel through my hands on the steering wheel. And anyway, he stood up right then and at the same time kind of turned like he's going to head back to the truck, because by this time, this thing was looking like it was winding up to do something. We didn't know, but it was looking very ominous. And it hit him. It's a bolt of energy came out from the bottom of this thing, a very sharp edged bolt of light. It was straight edged, but it wasn't like lightning. It looked more like a deliberate, like you call it a ray maybe. And it hit him in the kind of the head and the chest, and blew him up and back, like as if an explosion had gone off in front of him. And he hit the ground, 10 feet away. Some of the guys in the truck said 15 or 20 feet away, and the skeptics jump on that. That's an inconsistency. No, it's not. When we say 10 feet, we mean from his feet to where his feet ended up. He's like 6'1", and which put his head back at least close to 16 feet. So that explains that real well.
Right. And sorry to cut you off here, but Travis, why did you leave the truck? What made you leave the truck at all? I got to know, Travis.
Well, that's hard to explain because it was so unwise and impulsive, but There'd been a little incident before where a bear had run across the road, and Mike had to stop to keep from hitting it. So I jumped out and acted like I was chasing it. Of course, it wasn't.
You
really
were chasing it
from me. It was running from the truck, but it was just kind of a little bit of macho bravado, a bunch of guys trying to impress each other, and.
But also, you were really curious, Travis. I mean, you thought it'd be gone. You thought it would take off before you had a chance to get a really good look.
Yeah, I thought it was going to take off, and I just thought I could see it up close and that it'd be taken off even as I approached.
So you thought this thing would just fly away, and you just wanted to get a better view, basically, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So was that scene in the movie accurate, Travis?
No, because the blast of energy was a momentary burst, and I didn't actually see it. It knocked me unconscious immediately. I just felt this electric shock, this stunning force. But different guys on the crew were interviewed by different deputies, and they gave different descriptions in the police file.
Slightly
one
different.
described it as looking like a foot-wide beam hitting me. Another compared it to a bolt of lightning. And another actually described it as looking like a long blue flame.
Interesting.
But
those are all good descriptions, though.
One of them said it was the brightest thing he'd ever seen in his life.
Wow. Interesting.
Yes, it certainly was.
And by the way, in the chat room, there is a user by the name of Dane who says, I wonder if Travis saw a glowing orb controlling the ship. Did you see anything else around the craft, Travis?
No, I didn't see any glowing orbs, but it doesn't mean there wasn't one, but not in my view. And it took me years to kind of try to figure out what it was doing there and what actually happened. It doesn't make sense to me that it would fire a weapon at me. I mean, I probably posed absolutely no threat whatsoever. So what was the reason for this? Well, it was only in the last few years that I discovered that this part of the rim country here, the Sitgreaves National Forest, has the highest frequency of lightning strikes over land of any place in the United States. The only place with a higher frequency of lightning strikes is over the Everglades, and that's over water.
That's right.
So this propensity for lightning to strike made me think that what if this craft generated some kind of an electromagnetic field that triggered a strike.
Okay.
And it was a secondary discharge that got me.
By the way, gentlemen, there is a Heber, California, about 5 miles from my location.
I know that. Yeah.
Kind of weird, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it smells like cows.
Yeah. A dairy farm.
Yeah.
Or
Lots of cows, more than the people.
is there a slaughterhouse there?
There's a big, there's a slaughterhouse there, and there's probably more cows than there are people.
Wow.
Pretty amazing. And after this happened, by the way, the book, The Walton Experience was released in, I'm thinking 78, right? Was that right?
That's right.
77.
77.
77.
Oh, okay. 77. I did not know that. And of course, it was later turned to the film Fire in the Sky for those that don't know out there. And I still remember watching the movies back in the 90s.
Well, that Fire in the Sky, actually, that name came from this lightning frequency. We had stopped to put a fire out where one of these trees had been struck by lightning the night before on our way to work. You know, it wasn't all that unusual. If you're standing next to a tree that's been hit by lightning along that rim road, you can probably see the next tree that's been hit. And very often it doesn't kill the tree; it just explodes the bark in a line down the tree that just turns the sap to steam instantly, and it explodes the bark off the tree. But very often it can survive it. But the frequency of lightning also explains what they might have been doing there.
And for a moment here, go ahead. Sorry.
It's going to seem kind of late to mention this later, but I did a show with Rob Lowe, and him and his sons were going out and investigating unusual phenomena.
Yes. And
it was a 2-part show when it aired, my part, and then the second half of the show was this lady that sells crystals at rock and gym shows. Mm-hmm. But what Rob Lowe said as a segue between the two segments was, he said, Travis told me that the aliens were in the area looking for fulgurite, which was a total surprise to me because I did not know what it was. But I looked it up online, and fulgurite is a type of crystal that's formed when lightning strikes the earth.
Ah.
You got millions of degrees and millions of volts creating crystals that are not generated geologically. So that would explain what they might have been doing there. I even saw a reference in a crystal book here at a conference recently where they were saying this crystal is uniquely supposed to have the properties of having something to do with interdimensional stuff.
Mm-hmm. Very strange.
I have no idea how they know that to be the case, but that's what the book said.
It's very unusual that you just said that, because there is someone in the chat room, Ian Alberto, says, does Travis think aliens could be interdimensional beings instead of from another galaxy?
Well, yeah, there's all kinds of theories. To me, it's possible that aliens are actually us from the future, just coming back in time.
I could see that, yeah. I can definitely see that.
People have proposed that as an explanation. That's not impossible, but people that are grasping for that kind of an explanation are people who want to pretend we're alone in the universe, and that's highly unlikely too. But
right.
The interdimensional thing has to do with how are these extraterrestrial civilizations going to cross the vast distances between them and us. It would take years at near light speed. So who knows what kind of technology they might come up with in the future. Virtually everything technological that we have is, maybe less than 200 years old. I mean, 200 years ago, all we had was fire.
Yeah.
There was just virtually nothing technological but fire. We didn't even have electricity. So Michio Kaku was on, I think it was Larry King, but he was doing an interview and said, people keep imagining these civilizations as possibly being maybe a few hundred years ahead of us, but based on the age of these star systems, they could be hundreds of thousands or millions of years ahead of us.
Right.
We couldn't begin to guess what kind of technology they might have in the vast future.
Right. He talks about type 2 and type 3 civilizations out there, and I'm pretty sure he might be right about some of those theories of his. And Jennifer, to kick it over to you really quickly here.
Well, just one comment
go
real
ahead,
quick.
Travis.
Not all of those extraterrestrial civilizations are more advanced than us. Some of them are cave aliens, but those are not the ones that are coming here.
Yes, you think there might be some primitive alien beings out there, which I think you might be right about that. It's more than possible. I don't rule that out one bit. And Jennifer, to kick it over to you really quickly here, the first book, The Walton Experience, was released in 1977. Around that time, did you ever hear about that case when it was sort of in its infancy, per se?
Well, yes, I did. I was actually at the University of Arizona in 1977 and Tucson going to school.
That's right.
And I was a science textiles major. So as much as I didn't really follow the UFO story that much, I'd already sort of had my experience. I knew that we probably weren't alone in the universe, but I didn't know how to digest it. I hadn't yet given myself permission, to go forward with it. And then in 1993, when the film came out, I saw the film and I went, oh, I remember, this was going on. And so, I was aware, but I hadn't really begun to give myself permission to dig in.
You haven't jumped in just yet.
Right.
Right. And when that film did come out, I still remember watching it so many times when it would come out on satellite there. And I still remember that had a lot of people talking. It gained like a cult-like following really quickly.
Yes, it really did. And I think, as much as it distorted the actual story and made it scarier than it really was, that's what, Hollywood producers want to hold on to the rights to do, because that's how they sell movie tickets. But the fact that it sort of paralleled the true story was interesting. And I think it really served to help expand awareness in the mainstream culture about the fact that Travis was a real person, that, and of course they did many, TV shows, interviews. They went around the world promoting it. Paramount really did do a decent job in getting the guys to help promote the film, which I think was a good thing they did. But I kind of gained the knowledge I have now about that retrospectively when I stepped forward to do the documentary, because no one had ever bothered to do a really good documentary. And I just thought, somebody needs to, because future generations aren't reading. I mean, the generations we have now aren't reading, right?
True.
People the younger culture gets their information in sound bites,
audiobooks, right?
So a decent documentary that can stream online and things like this, or people can pick up on Netflix or other places, that will help to continue to educate generations to come. And I thought it was important to do a decent job with the people who were still alive, because we were losing them, and we've even lost some more.
Right.
Of course, we just lost Stanton Friedman, and we lost Marlon Gillespie, who was the sheriff at the time of the incident. And I'm not sure if we still have the polygraph examiner, Cy Gilson, alive or not. He was in his 90s when I interviewed him in Tucson. So I knew these people would be gone soon.
Right.
It was really important to get them on tape telling their story.
Well, I'm glad you did. And there's no other case more famous than this one than Travis is here with Mike and the crew. However, maybe the only one that sort of even comes close is perhaps the Betty and Barney Hill case.
Right.
Yeah, that's the only one I think that's probably maybe as famous. And Mike, he has his own opinions on that case, which is always interesting to ask him.
Betty and Barney Hill case? Yeah.
You always...
I have
a lot
an
to say.
addition. Really, it's not like a introspection thing. It's just, I met Betty Hill one day when I think we were in Connecticut or something, at a UFO convention there. And she personally told me about an experience she had with a Bigfoot. And I've had a little bit of trouble, because it's hard for me to believe Bigfoot is a real thing. There's so much, nobody's ever come up with anything. This is supposed to be something that actually lives in the forest and people see it all the time. And it just seems to me, that put it this way, I just don't really think it's real. I don't say it can't be real, but I say that it looks like it's not. And so when she said that to me, I thought, oh, you think that? And she had I think she had more than one experience, and it just kind of shone a little bit of a bad light on her, but not necessarily on the UFO event, But that's the only addition I have to that.
Understood.
Otherwise,
Understood.
It's a pretty good story, yeah.
And Jennifer, where do you align yourself in terms of the mythical creature Bigfoot?
Well, it's a big question mark for me. I've never had a personal encounter, although I know people who have. I've read books about it. I think there's a lot that we have yet to understand in the field of consciousness. I myself have had some pretty strange deja vu and telepathic precognitive events that if I went to try to explain them to someone, they would say, oh, she's lost her rocker. She's out of her mind. But yet, beyond a shadow of a doubt, I know that these things were real for me. So I think until we yet further know how to unpack and understand consciousness and telepathy, we know that there's communication that goes on, say, between animals, right? Between one another. And sometimes, like mothers and their babies will feel that they have a telepathic understanding, or between two twins, they'll know something that's happening to the other twin at the same time. And many people that have studied the whole Bigfoot scenario believe that this is a highly telepathic being of some sort that may be primitive to our ways of thinking, but in other ways might be much more developed psychically or telepathically. And that's the story that comes to mind is there's some famous plane crash in Alaska where this guy is trapped in a plane and starving to death and freezing to death. And this Bigfoot being brings him food, brings him a fish and brings him berries and brings him, nuts and things like this, and cracks them and hands them to him and keeps him alive until rescue services can get to him about 3 days later. So, there are these pretty well documented stories. And I tend to think that until you're there and have the experience, we need to follow the facts. We can't really get involved in speculation and judgment because then we close ourselves off to the potential of the reality, just as we have in the mainstream culture to the whole UFO phenomenon for 70 years, correct?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I can't be completely closed-minded on the subject, even though Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster are two things that I'm kind of ruling off of existence. However, when I hear stories about, let's say, for an example, this 3-year-old, I believe his name was like Casey Hathaway, who was found by rescuers, I forget what time it was. This was a while back, and it was pretty cold out there in North Carolina, and he had went missing, and he apparently said that he was helped by some sort of creature. He says it was a bear, but bears don't do that sort of thing. So who knows what it was?
Right.
Could have been a Bigfoot. Who knows, right?
Well, here's the thing. Game and Fish tells us that there is a bear per square mile on average in the state of Arizona. But I know outdoorsmen who have gone for years and never seen a bear.
Right.
Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. It just might mean that they're better at hiding from us.
So Travis, you're kind of on board that there might be a Bigfoot, possibly.
Well, the most popular theory is that since there's an association with UFO sightings,
right,
that it might be some sort of interdimensional type where there's a temporary crossover and it's not anything that lives there all the time. but I've never seen anything like that. However, there was a young fellow that was on another woods crew and headed down the dirt road out to the contract that his father had. He looked over and he said what he described as being a Bigfoot, big hairy man with a sort of a sheep-like face was his description. But it really freaked him out. He was extremely disturbed by it. He was never into anything paranormal before or after. And he was actually kind of religious as sort of a kid. And he insists he saw it. So, but I've never seen it.
Interesting. What were you saying, Mike?
Well, yeah, he's talking about a fellow named Jody Crandall. I know him real well.
I've worked with people without their permission. That's the reason I didn't mention his name. But
Mike.
Oh, well, he's talked about that a lot to a lot of people.
Well, I don't know if he'd want it on the radio, but whatever.
You never heard this.
I think he would. He's entered a lot of logging contests that I've been in, and he's a fairly open person. I don't think he'd worry about the name at all.
Right on, right on. And you brought up religion. Now I am curious, and I'll start with you, Jennifer. Jennifer, are you religious by any chance?
Well, I would say I'm more spiritual than religious.
Okay.
I'm Jewish by my background. I actually converted to Judaism because I thought it made more sense than anything else, because it has a big component of human history to it that is not in debate anywhere. And actually, Judaism doesn't really require you to have a blind faith or an acceptance in something you don't really know. It just gives you kind of a code of ethics and a human history of ethics that you can follow and teach your children with. But there's also a really interesting component of mysticism and Kabbalah within Judaism that explains mystical experience. And that's what got my attention when I was in my early 20s, because I'd had a number of out-of-body and mystical experiences. I lived on a yoga ashram. I had telepathic and precognitive events happening with the Amrit Desai, who was the yoga teacher or the guru at the ashram. So I knew that there were odd things. Like I said earlier, if I really shared them all, people would think I was really off my rocker.
They think you're nuts, right?
Yeah, they would. But, when they were in the context of my life, they made sense, and it made me curious about, okay, what's the nature of personal reality? Like I read the Seth material and Seth Speaks and things like that, and I read some of the Ramtha material. I was really a seeker spiritually at a quite young age, because my parents were atheists. They didn't really know what to teach me or offer me or give me. And so I had to kind of do the hunt on my own. And of course, lived on a yoga ashram, got into Ram Dass, right? Be Here Now, these sorts of things, studied TM. So I would say I am very spiritual. I'm probably a combination somewhere between a Buddhist and a Jew, understanding the overlap between those two.
Right.
And I think that there are a lot of spiritual traditions on the planet that can offer us insights into consciousness and human evolution, and that we're here for a purpose, and that what we do here matters, and how we behave and orchestrate our lives and what we attempt to accomplish and give to others makes a difference.
You've been to Sedona, Arizona, correct?
Several times.
I was about to say, you sound like a lady that I once spoke to out there. You sound just like her in a way, which is a good thing.
Maybe it was me. You never know.
Right. You never know. And Travis, I'm curious, are you religious, Travis, or were you at any time growing up, parents religious? What's the deal, Travis? Tell us.
Yeah, I was religious. I was raised that way. My younger brother went on a mission for the church. My older sister taught Relief Society. And heck, even my oldest brother taught Sunday school. But I never was that deep into it. I would consider myself more spiritual than religious. It's just looking for a system that explains everything more broadly I think the doctrines are a little bit too specific to include everything.
Yeah.
Amazing. And Mike, go ahead. Are you religious at all today or in the past? What's up?
Well, I certainly was in the past. That era that Travis is talking about there, we were kind of like easy riders,
I love that.
But that played into the film too. But I started out I was born a Mormon, and I reached, the legal age of reason somewhere around 19 or 20. And a few years later, I actually had myself excommunicated from the Mormon Church.
Oh,
even
damn.
though I had never done anything really wrong in my life. But the reason I did is because I was a realist. I've been a realist since birth, really. And so, even way before this UFO incident with Travis and I just was such a realist that I could no longer accept the Mormon religion doctrine-wise, but I have never let go of it as far as a good way to raise children, a good way to live. Those people are very, very humble. They're very, very good people. And, right there in Snowflake especially, that is such a good place for all that. And Travis doesn't mind it too much because he's chosen to live there ever since. And, when we got into later life, after we went through that rebel sort of period that Travis and I both went through, I became spiritual, but I remained a realist. So when that incident happened to us, that was an extreme eye-opener. Extreme.
I was going to say that must have been a real eye-opening experience for both of you, for sure, no doubt.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
My goodness. So now we are at the part here in the story where you were hit with this blue beam, Travis, and basically Mike drove off. I always giggle about that. He hightailed it out of there. He went 90 going north.
Well, that was the smart thing to do. It would have been foolish to get somebody else killed to save what they all believed was a dead man. That blast was so violent that pretty much all of them figured it had killed me.
Mike, did you think he was gone?
Yeah, I thought when we went back to the site later that we would find him dead there.
Oh my!
But that's how we all thought it killed him. Every one of us. He's, like you said, very violent.
Kenny said he wasn't afraid it was going to come back. He was afraid of what my corpse was going to look like, all burned up or blown apart or something.
That's right.
Oh, toasty. Yeah, like a cattle mutilation case, right?
Right.
Yeah, or just the blast of energy, how much harm that would do, to be hit by that, tear you apart.
Right. And Mike, and when this happened, did you feel any initial pain when this happened, or did you instantly just go out?
Well, I don't remember any pain. I remember tremendous fear. I remember panic like I'd never experienced before.
Oh, I meant Travis. I'm sorry.
I lost consciousness. I felt the stunning force. I'd been hit by electrical shock, spark plug, and working on chainsaws and cars and stuff. I know what it's like to be electrocuted, and I know what it's like to be hit with something. I've had some motorcycle accidents, and I know what a big impact feels like, and that's what it was like. John said that my body fell, in his words, like a sack of meat, like there wasn't a bone in my body.
Damn.
That's a good description.
And, they say that Steve's first remark was, it got him, which is what you would say if you shot a deer. You got your deer.
Yeah, you were basically ragdolled by this.
Mm-hmm. He was wedged out.
My goodness. And then you hightailed it out of there, Mike, and you were driving off. What were the other guys telling you when you were driving off, high speeding out of there?
Well, it was a little hard to make it out because there was 5 guys, one in the front seat and four in the back, and everybody was talking screaming at once. I couldn't really, periodically I could make out, words. Basically, those words were saying, get the hell out of here. What the hell just happened? People would just, these guys were just so completely blown away by this. Travis got blown away. We were blown away too, by the emotion of it. And it was blind panic. I didn't go very far down the road before I started thinking, where the panic kind of wore off, and I started using my brain, and I slowed down a little bit, and then I finally stopped about a quarter mile away. And that flight down that road was hellish. That movie Fire in the Sky did a pretty good job, but in the reality it was actually worse than that. We actually hit these humps of dirt, as like I was saying before, in order to even get in there, we had to use shovels and stuff to bring those humped up piles of dirt down a little bit. And I couldn't hit those right going out of there. I was going like 30 or 35 or so, and we were literally flying. We were catching air over a couple of those humps, and so bad that one of them that I tried to get around, we flew over it, and the truck came down so hard that I couldn't keep clear, and I knocked a mirror off the truck and sideswiped the truck on a tree, stuff like that. It was pretty violent. It was very hectic, very, very so.
Yeah.
And when I did stop, these guys were just they didn't know what I was doing. Why am I stopping? That's basically what I heard from them. And one of the guys, Steve Pierce, didn't say anything. Every time I glanced back, especially after I stopped the truck and I glanced back, Steve Pierce he looked like he'd been crying. He was traumatized, put it that way. That's what happened. And when we went back to the site, unlike the movie, which has those guys getting out and me going back alone, that is a complete reversal of what happened in reality. Imagine yourself if that happened to you, and then you have the choice of getting out of the truck and standing there in the dark after something like that happened. No, they all got back in the truck, and it was unanimous. Nobody even thought about it. They just got back in the truck when I told them we were going back. And so we did go back, and there was a kind of a quiet after that. Going back, it was just quiet in the truck, amazingly quiet. And we pulled that truck up into that clearing and shone the light up in there, and Travis wasn't there. I expected to find a dead body. I expected to find, like he said, who knows what shape, a smoking corpse,
True.
And we got out. We walked around that clearing. We had one flashlight, and we all walked around that clearing looking for Travis and shouting for him. And we were pretty much in a bundle. We weren't like arm in arm, but close together, and within touching each other really, as far as like our shoulders and stuff. But when we couldn't find him there, John Gillette says it best. They all knew what happened. I went to my knees. I broke down, and it wasn't so much that he wasn't there. Wondering what happened to him. It was, in a way, it was a breakdown of relief that he wasn't a charged smoking corpse.
Yeah, and, I bet.
So, that's something that nobody's ever said before. I haven't really said it before, at least not recently. But so when I broke down, it was two things. It was, what the heck happened to him. And it was also a relief that we didn't find a smoking, destroyed body there. And that's what it was about. But I was very humiliated by
Right. And when you went missing, Travis, there were many people searching for you at one point. people even thought the group had murdered you, Travis.
Yeah. Even my family was divided on that. My oldest brother, Don, was, made some pretty violent accusations of some of the crew. He had a little bit of an incident there with Dwayne Smith, but he was out there basically looking for my body, but my brother that was closer to me in age was much more believing of the crew. He already knew Mike to some extent, and he'd had a sighting of his own 8 or 10 years before, so he was not disbelieving in the whole idea.
Yeah, he actually worked for me. I wasn't just a little bit familiar with Dwayne. I was very familiar with Dwayne. He actually worked for me for quite a while before that, 2 or 3 years before, 4 or 5 years before, actually. And
but not at the same time I was working.
No, not at the same time. Nope, not at the same time.
Very, very interesting. And of course, in that part of the movie, there's a scene when, we'll talk about the abduction in a moment here, but I did want to ask you first, when you did make that return, we're skipping ahead here, but I'm curious, there's a scene where you are at a telephone booth. Did that scene actually happen?
Yes, but I was not naked. Hollywood had to embellish that with nudity, but I was wearing the same clothes that I had been taken in. And my brother even had the presence of mind to try to, bag them up for forensic analysis, but there was so much pressure about other things, media stuff, that it got overlooked, and the bag that they were sealed in got torn open, and so that plan was abandoned.
Yes, and Travis, when you first initially came home and told your family, what was their reaction to it all? Did they believe you?
Well, I was in terrible shape. I was hanging by a thread. I couldn't hardly speak. I couldn't finish a sentence. And my brother knew that the sheriff's department were not going to be gentle in interrogation, and he was determined to get me medical help before any sort of discussion with the sheriff's department.
Strangely enough, there was another individual who saw this. Jennifer, you said there was an FBI agent in the area who saw the craft too.
That's right. That was uncovered by Tracy Torme when he was preparing, he was doing pre-production research on the whole story, and he uncovered this. Travis can speak a little more to it than I can, because Tracy is the one who recounted this story to Travis, but I thought it was an interesting confirmation that someone else besides
deer hunting,
these guys saw it.
Military intelligence, and definitely had the high, serious credentials. But there were also a few other sightings, hunters, campers, fishermen in the area that wrote reports and turned them into the sheriff. But I don't know if he followed up on any of those. They were just people who saw the craft leaving or passing over.
And in the chat room, the other sighter says, what did the ship look like if they haven't described it yet? I think he's asking something else here. But Travis, what was this ship like exactly? Now I'm curious.
Well, it was a metallic disc, and it was extremely smooth. And like Mike said, in spite of the fearful situation, I think everybody was struck by the beauty of it, the perfection. Smooth as glass.
Interesting.
All one surface, some of it opaque and some of it giving off light. It's I've compared it to if you're watching a television with a glass screen and you can see the window, if you have a lighted window in the room, that's reflecting off the surface of the screen at the same time you're seeing the picture. The light that's, coming from the television. So you got two sources of light. This glow, it gave the whole area kind of an eerie, otherworldly feel. And at the same time, it was reflecting the surrounding trees.
That's right.
Hard to describe, but it's giving off light and reflecting at the same time.
And Mike, what is your recollection of this craft?
Just exactly what he said. I actually illustrated several times that craft, and I couldn't do it justice. And I developed finally the ability to almost create a photograph. I've done quite a bit of that illustrating, and I have never been able to justify the actual look of that craft. I tried, and what he was describing there as it had this glass-like surface in it, and it had areas that were lighted, and at the same time, it was reflecting the foliage, the ground, and everything around. In fact, you could see Travis's reflection in the surface of that craft.
There's actually a little graphic of it for people who are listening. If they want to go to TravisWaltonTheMovie.com and then go to the press release page and scroll down a little bit, I have something called a electronic press kit, and in that they can just see a picture of it that was started originally from one of Mike's drawings that he offered us to use in the film. So.
And that's at TravisWaltonTheMovie.com.
TheMovie.com, and then go to the press release page and go to the electronic press kit, and you'll be able to see a little drawing of it there.
Yes, I'm going right now to the website, the electronic press release kit.
Right. And then just scroll down a little bit. First, you'll see what looks like a media kit, which is the cover of the DVD.
Right.
And then the second page, you'll see a picture of Travis getting hit by this beam. And it's a little, what we call a pitch script in the industry, where you're trying to sell a film to a distributor, and you have to kind of put basic information on it. Legal information, copyright, stuff like that. But there's a little picture of the craft there.
Amazing. I'm going to get that up on the chat room now.
Okay.
Well, the Travis documentary is, the ultimate work as far as a documentary is concerned. And I would encourage people not to rely on the Hollywood movie for exactly what happened. But it does a good job of communicating the emotional meat grinder we went through at the time. That's conveyed pretty well. But I've had a number of producers come to me about a dramatic recreation, redoing the theatrical movie. But I haven't been persuaded that any of them are capable of doing it justice. But probably ought to be done just to fix what the fictionalizations Hollywood did in the drama.
If they could undo it.
Yeah, I'm curious, Travis, what exactly did you think of the film as a whole? Did you like the actor who played you, D.B. Sweeney?
Well, he doesn't look anything like me, but,
he doesn't.
I brought my oldest boy with me, and people say, "Oh, you brought D.B. Sweeney with you," and I go, "Oh, wow." It's uncanny, the resemblance between my son and D.B. Sweeney, who doesn't look anything like me. But it's when I show people the picture of the two of them side by side, people just gasp at the incredible similarity. And I heard today again that somebody had, who had never met my son. He came to my grandson's birthday party today, and they said, "Wow, he looks so much like D.B. Sweeney."
Wow!
But it's just a coincidence, because I don't think any of the casting people had ever met my son either.
You might have to ask your wife and get a little blood test there, Mike. I mean, Mike, Travis.
Well, I'll tell you what. I think he looks like D.B. Sweeney, and I think Travis looked enough like him to where he was a good pick for that character. Yeah.
Well, I think choosing Robert Patrick to play Mike was a good choice.
Yeah, Robert Patrick. That's pretty insane that he played Mike here, the Terminator, the T-1000.
Yeah, liquid metal man, liquid metal cop.
Yes, the T-1000.
That
that's
character,
insane.
yeah, he made me feel good, and I've made this comment several times, especially like on Good Morning America. I said, he plays me better than me.
That's so funny. So overall, both of you did like the adaptation.
Well, when I was handed a copy of the script, I should have felt a little more foreboding from the fact that the part aboard the craft was not in the script. They were saying, we've got some things we're still resolving there. But yeah, they knew that I was not going to be happy with the degree of fictionalization of what happened aboard the craft. But
and
I suppose that people who have real movies made about real life events are never 100% satisfied, because it's a very hard thing to do is to dramatize real life.
Yeah. You won't get any complaints from me about that. That's very true. And Mike and Travis, when you first initially heard that there was going to be a film, what on earth did you guys even think at that point?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I thought it would be a good thing to put people through what we went through so that they would understand not just the reality of it, but the trauma of what we'd experienced.
Amazing. And Mike, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, what I really liked about the film was the fact that it was an all-star cast. You couldn't pick a better group. They were all previously stars unto themselves. They each had successes before that. Steve Pierce was played by, what was his name? Henry. What was his name, Travis?
Henry
the guy
Thomas?
played in he was in that movie, you're
talking about Greg Hayes.
Yeah. No, not Greg Hayes. I was talking about the guy that played.
The guy who played him, Henry Thomas, I recall.
Yes, Henry Thomas. That's right. That's the name I was trying to get.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I forget names too.
I do too.
I was right there, but I couldn't remember it.
I'm right there with you. I always do that.
Yeah, and he played that little boy, and that film was just amazing. That was a major movie, one of the box offices of all times.
The movie E.T.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot.
All those guys, every single one of them, including the sheriff, the investigator, all of them. So I don't know how they afforded all that for that movie.
Was the sheriff and the skeptics all rolled into one character?
Yeah, but they were all dynamic characters who were all already successful and big names.
They all have a long list of accomplishments. Before going into this film, no doubt, they were all pretty much veterans at this time, and they all did a great job. I thought the film was rather good. And Jennifer, did you like the film for how it turned out? I'm curious.
Do you mean, are we now? I always have to clarify. Are we talking about Travis, the true story of Travis Walton, or are we talking about the 1993 film?
Correct.
Which film? You say correct, but which film?
Fire in the Sky.
Fire in the Sky.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Fire in the Sky, as I had said before, woke the mainstream up in a way that other films had not, that this was potentially a real story or a true story. But I think it just furthered, because they didn't stick to the facts, it further muddied the water, as many television programs and episodes do. Like even the newest one that is out there, well, there's a couple out there now. I mean, Unidentified is doing a pretty good job, but the Blue Book Project, right? That's further muttering the water sort of for the American public because they don't read, they don't know the history, and they take the Hollywood version and think it's the real version. So I can't tell you how many people, even mainstream ufologists who are well known, think Travis was returned naked and think he was just tortured by gray aliens, which isn't true. Like there's a huge, important aspect of Travis's story that many people miss. He met two species on the craft that he was on, right? And he walked off one craft, walked through a hangar, walked in a medical facility, and met other beings that looked human just like him. I mean, it's an amazing story. And the time when he had his story, it was so new to encounters with beings coming out in the UFO material. And these same beings are still being seen 40 years later by abductees. So I think that Fire in the Sky did not do a good service to really what needs to happen in educating the public about the reality that we're not alone and there's more than one species probably interacting and visiting with us. I mean, it was a nice Hollywood piece, but if you begin to separate fact from fiction, as we all have to do in our lives,
right,
it did not really do the service that I intended to do. I mean, not that I'm pushing the other film, the newer film, the documentary, but I think in that part, we did a decent job with the on board the craft experience because we followed an audio script from an interview I did with Travis. Actually, the audio you hear in the film is the very first regression Travis did with blanking on the psychologist's name at the moment. Harder. Yes. James Harder.
James Harder. Oh, yes, right.
That was an audio recording made. We used the archival audio material wherever we could. We went back to the source and used that original audio of Travis describing what he experienced in that hypnosis. And then we matched visuals to that description. And I think we did a much better job, if I can say, at least sticking to the true story of the event.
Yes, you did. Sure did.
And that hypnosis that Dr. Harder did was really a landmark. It was a major turning point for me because up until then, I could hardly finish a sentence. I was so traumatized that I was inarticulate. The first time I'd ever actually completed a description of everything that had happened to my brother or the sheriff or anybody.
Yeah, I met Travis before he had that hypnosis. I went down there, and even though it had been like a day or more than a day before he had actually been returned, I can vouch for the fact that he couldn't put a sentence together. He was so completely disjointed, so completely trauma. I consider it to be trauma. And that's exactly the way he acted. And so I can see that hypnosis really helped him.
I was just about to ask you if you went through that whole process, Travis, and I got my answer. And I'm also curious, Travis, if even today, if you still have any sort of flashbacks from any of those events that we are talking about now, maybe flashbacks, maybe like daydreams or even maybe dreams in general. Travis, go ahead.
Yeah, I thought I was much more recovered than I actually am. In 2014, I had a sighting that was pretty dramatic, but I had thought that I had come to a different understanding of their intent, whether they were dangerous or, frightening. But I was surprised at how frightened I was, much more than I thought I would be. In 2014, it was just a close encounter. And
right.
My son says, Dad, should we pull over and take a picture. I go, no, keep going. And
Yes.
I'm saying, why did I say that? That's just crazy. I wished I had that picture.
Interesting. And Travis, another funny story is back in, I think it must have been 2016, you went out to George Norrie's birthday party out there in Joshua Tree, California.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were out there, you were sitting at this table with a number of other individuals in ufology, and there's a photograph of all of you guys that was posted on the main website of the Contact in the Desert website. And I remember looking at this photograph, and in the background you can see me there. It's quite hilarious, and I always thought that's pretty funny. I always think, man, we have a photograph together, Travis, and you don't even know it.
Okay.
From a distance, you can see me.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
I haven't even seen what you look like, actually. I don't even know what you look like.
Mike, how dare you? How do you not know what I look like?
I don't.
No.
I've never seen a picture of
He
you.
picked me up at the airport and took me back and put me on the plane. We spent quite a bit of time together.
But by the way, Travis, did you like it out there in Joshua Tree?
Yeah, I thought that was much more cordial and friendly than later locations. But
It's pretty damn hot, right?
yeah, hot and dusty, but kind of spread out. But
Michael Decon, were you there in 2016 at Joshua Tree at Contact in the Desert?
I sure was.
Okay, well then you saw the film if you came to the screening, because
I did.
We screened it there. In 2016.
I saw it.
Yeah, good.
Well, now, have I ever met you, Michael?
No, we have never met, Mike. Unfortunately,
there's been times that people come up and shake my hand and say things and talk to me, and I don't know who they are. So I've met a lot of people that know me, and I don't know them. I just don't ever remember meeting you.
Yeah, it happens. I recall even running into Stanton Friedman at that time, and I ran into him maybe two or three times, and at the very end of the birthday celebration, I saw him outside, and I was just saying bye to him, and he asked me if I was the driver. That was pretty funny. I was like, no, not at all. I'm not driving you anywhere. Yeah, he was, well, you know his condition during that time.
Yeah,
he was pretty bad. Poor guy. And it's kind of insane that he's gone already, don't you think?
Yeah, we never want the people we love to go.
We sure don't. And I miss him already.
Yeah, he made a wonderful contribution. And it's, we all kind of know that life is finite and we have a limited amount of time. So that's why I said it kind of matters what we do when we're here. That's why it's important we do what we think is most important. And
you think it kind of matters? I think it totally matters.
It totally matters. It totally matters. Yeah. It's, we have many problems to solve in this world. And I think that if we really began to address this issue in the proper light, educationally, academically, politically, religiously, spiritually, financially, it could really change the world's perspective and be a big eye opener and break down a lot of the superficial barriers that are there between different ideologies, different countries, different religious backgrounds, and different long-range focuses for humanity. It's kind of like the environment, right? We have all got to come together on the environment. I think we're already we have like 11 years or something to turn back or begin to turn back with policies and changes, the environment. And if we don't, we are sunk. We are
I've never subscribed to the theory that, boy, the thing that would solve this whole UFO mystery, the thing that would make it all better is for the government to just admit that it's real. I don't agree. I think that their secrecy to a certain extent is justified. Whatever technology we've harvested and recovered, we don't want to throw open the books the United States has enemies on this planet, unfortunately. Several countries that would love to destroy us if they were confident that we didn't have some technology waiting in the wings that might be better than anything they have. So I think it's a good idea to hold off on that at this point.
Well, then-
Well,
for no
I
other
didn't.
reason.
I didn't actually say, Travis. Not that to get into argument with you, but I didn't actually say that we should just announce to the world tomorrow they're real. But I said we
No,
have
I didn't.
to begin
I
to
wasn't
digest
implying that you
this.
did. I'm talking about ufology in general.
Yeah,
You know, I go to
understand.
conferences all over, and people are constantly saying, you know, if the government would just open the books and tell us, you know.
Yeah,
I've never heard that
it's
from
not the
you, but
government that's
I hear
gonna
that
save
all
us.
the
Yeah.
time out there. That
Well, they are trying.
I think the
Yeah.
problem is that we're not ready. I believe that there's probably something, this is just my opinion, but something akin to the Prime Directive, the non-interference directive, that the reason they're not landing and saying, here we are, and here's all the technology you'd like to have, is because that would not be in our best interest. It would be destructive. You know, the history of Earth's civilizations, societies more advanced than others, exploring. Every time they encounter a less advanced technology here on the Earth, it's always destructive to the less developed. And so I think that would probably hold true with to a multiplicity of the same effect. To, you know, for aliens to come in and say, here we are, and by the way, here's a bunch of technology. You know, it's a brand new box of matches. Now go play. I don't think it's a good idea.
Amazing.
Well, I'll tell you something. The government, it wouldn't be a good idea to release everything all at once like that, but they are trickling it out. And that's important. People keep missing the fact. Like, I was waiting for you to say, you've seen this stuff, especially on Fox, this Tic Tac and another video and stuff
Mike,
like that.
We're going to get into that here on the second half. All these things we're talking about, we will jump into it, as well as Mike's experience on this craft, or Travis's his experience on this craft. But right now I'm looking at the clock, and we definitely need to take a little bit of a break here. And of course, when we return, we'll jump into that. And Travis, Jennifer, and Mike, are you guys okay and good for a little break here?
Yep,
Yes.
absolutely.
How long of a break?
I'm thinking either 5-10 minutes.
Okay.
No problem.
Is that cool
No
with
problem.
you guys?
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, sounds
Very
good.
Cool.
Just stay on the line. And Travis, are you? Can you do that? Can you stay on the line, or do you need me to call you back?
I can stay on the line.
Okay, well, we're all going to go on a little break here, and when we return, ladies and gentlemen, we'll jump into all these subjects. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. And welcome back, boys and girls. Here we are again on a night like this, and I am joined by our friends yet again. Let's bring them all in here, and I do want to thank all of you for hanging out with us this evening. I know we went on a break there, but it is needed when you are doing a show like this one. And welcome back, Jennifer, Mike, and Travis. How's it going?
Very good.
You guys good?
Yeah, thanks.
You enjoyed that little break there, I hope. I hope everyone enjoyed the break. I always gotta enjoy those breaks. I really appreciate them, and I appreciate everyone out there who stayed in here tonight and listened to this incredible segment we have going on here. And before the break, we were talking about the abduction, the actual moment Travis basically came out of consciousness is what I'm trying to get at here. And Travis, when you came about, what did you see when you were aboard, I guess you could say, a craft?
Well, that's my least favorite memory to visit.
Of course.
But I didn't regain consciousness very quickly. I didn't just wake up. I was kind of in and out for I don't know how long. But I was in a lot of pain, and I couldn't even focus my eyes at first. I could tell there was something lying across my chest, some sort of a device. In the movie, they show a sequence where the actor has a membrane over his face, and he's struggling to scream through it, struggling to breathe through it. Well, there was no membrane, but I think that's the one departure from reality that was an improvement in terms of communicating to the audience the source of my panic. It's really hard to describe it if there's no dialogue, you know. There was nobody to talk to. I'm just screaming mindlessly. And so it showed something that otherwise, in the past, when I tried to explain to people the level of fear I was experiencing, some people would actually say things like, "Oh, I wouldn't be that scared. I'd just stay calm and ask good questions and take advantage of this meeting and
right.
You know, maybe even grab a souvenir to take home with me. You know, they don't understand.
That's all hindsight.
You know, what I was going through was a feeling of being mortally wounded and a feeling of suffocation that generates a type of panic that you just can't explain away well, I've compared it to waterboarding.
Oh, wow.
An interrogation technique where the subject is led to believe they're going to drown. They don't. No one's ever died from it. It's something that our own guys practice. They rehearse it to make themselves more resistant to it. But it still works because you just can't reason away the feeling that suffocation gives. And I was feeling a shortness of breath, an inability to get enough oxygen that just added to the feeling of panic. It also interfered with my ability to wake up, to regain consciousness. I could see there was a light above me, but the ceiling was closer than where it ought to be, so I figured I was on some raised surface. Turns out that was only part of it. It was just a very small room with some low ceilings, but There was a light fixture overhead. Wasn't particularly bright. It was not all that bright at all, but it hurt to look at it. A pain in my eyes. Probably due to the injury I'd just suffered. And I think possibly a certain amount of it had been that I had been had some sort of repairs done that wasn't complete. When I could finally focus my eyes, I could see that these weren't doctors standing over me, that these were these creatures. And that sudden realization was such a shock, such a shot of adrenaline that, there's just nothing to compare it to. But it gave me a boost of strength. Even though I was in a very weakened condition, I flailed out. My arm made contact with one of them. I was much softer and lighter than I expected.
Yeah, in the movie, you are seen as like pushing or striking one of these beings, if I recall correctly.
Yeah. And it fell back into the other one. I rolled away in the other direction. The device that they had lying across my chest fell off. But I was, totally, my gaze was riveted on them and what they were doing. I, immediately realized that no, I hadn't been injured and taken to a hospital, that I was, on board this craft, and I felt trapped. And it was so claustrophobic because it was so small in there and so difficult to breathe, dimly lit. The whole thing was very, it gave me a feeling of being trapped. And at the same time, the desperation from needing more air than I was getting. But the three of them stared at me in a way that gave me a really weird sort of a squirmy feeling in my head. And I think, in hindsight, that what they were probably attempting to regain some sort of control over me, mind control.
No.
To sedate me, to get me calmed down, and to where they could get me back on the table and complete what they were doing, which, contrary to a lot of news reports who actually took the liberty of calling it medical experiments, I never said that myself. I think that probably they were simply trying to revive me. That this encounter, that when I stood up, I closed the distance, kind of like a spark gap, you just get close enough and all of a sudden the energy jumps, and it was devastating and very destructive. And since the nearest hospital was an hour away in either direction, and none of the crew knew CPR as far as I knew, but probably the thing that made it necessary to take me aboard. And so you wouldn't really classify it as an abduction, Yeah, I was taken, but for my own good. It's kind of like trying to convince a kid that the dentist isn't a white-coated monster out to make him feel pain. To tell him, look, this is all for your own good. He doesn't want to hurt you. It's all going to be okay. And none of that makes any sense to the kid. He's convinced that this dentist is a monster. So kind of like that. I was determined to fight because I felt like I was defending myself, that I was at their mercy, and all I wanted was to escape.
And at this point, what was your level of pain as you laid there and looked up at that bright light and seeing these three figures standing there?
Well, it was very, very painful, but I'm used to dealing with discomfort and pain. It's a tough job, and training is tough. You just learn to endure and find ways to cope with it, But I was getting ready to attack them because they were between me and the door. But I don't know whether they figured out that's what I was about to do, or just figured that this mind control thing just was not working. But anyway, they all turned and left very quickly. You can see that without mind control, the physical advantage, even in my weakened condition, would have been really enormous over them. Just even a slight blow could seriously injure them, and probably when they meant no harm.
Interesting. And of course, when you are finally coming to being and you are looking around the room, what else did you see there?
Well, there were some instruments. I grabbed one of them. I don't know what it was, but it was a rod-like instrument that I was just using as a weapon, flailing through the air, making striking motions before they got close enough to actually hit, but to keep them away from me. And after I was returned, I underwent an EEG, brainwave scan, which showed some residual effects of my injury that didn't show up in subsequent EEGs, brainwave scans. And this was done at Burroughs Neurological, which is a world-famous brain trauma center. It's where Muhammad Ali went when he was here with his neurological problems. He even donated a wing to the hospital there. But Dr. Kendall did not tell the technician who I was or what had happened to me, which made the unusual tracings more significant in that he had no expectations, was just told to look for signs of, injury or whatever, And so I was not functioning well at that point, and I think, luckily for me, that they were eventually able to get me back under sedation and complete the repairs. But meanwhile, I was looking for a way out of the craft, trying to open the door any way I could, pressing buttons, pushing levers, whatever, try to open what I thought were doors leading to the outside, but piecing together the layout later, I could see that those doors wouldn't have led to the outside anyway. And on top of that, at that point, the craft was probably not in the clearing anymore. But I was assuming that it was, that all I had to do was open a door and drop to the ground.
Right. And at this point, at any point, did you think you were even, I guess, in orbit around the Earth, or did you think you were somewhere even further?
Well, that's definitely possible. I was thinking this could be, opening the door might be a bad mistake if
Right.
if it's a vacuum outside. But I could see points of light. If this was an actual view of where it was, that would definitely not be a good idea. But I think the entrance of this human-looking individual was probably deliberate, with the idea that my fear was going to cause me to resist any attempts to get me back on the table, period. So seeing something that looked human to me made me cooperate.
Oh, so you did see someone that looked like us.
Yeah. Yeah, I assumed it was a rescue. They're coming to save me from these monsters. But some people say, well, could it have been robots? Or could it have been an illusion? I doubt if it was a mind control type of illusion, because I think that kind of control wasn't working at that point, that there was too much neurological disturbance from my injury. But for whatever reason, they knew I wasn't going to cooperate with anything that didn't look like someone there to rescue me. So this man took me out of the craft. And at this point, I don't know if it was there the whole time or if it's just recently been there or what, but at this point, it was parked inside of this large enclosure. I don't know whether it was an actual airplane hangar or the inside of a larger craft. But I was not spending a whole lot of time observing my surroundings. I was more concerned with, where is this guy taking me, And he seemed to be in quite a bit of a hurry. And that, in hindsight, was probably due to my injury. And he took me down a hallway to a room where there were some other people. Except they weren't wearing a helmet. He had a helmet on. And it was easier to breathe outside of that craft. So I don't know. It could have been due to that I was kind of recovering, shaking off the effects of my injury, or it could be that the atmosphere inside of that craft was more suited for the so-called grays.
Understood.
They didn't have that term back in 1975. They didn't call these beings grays, but
right.
Anyway, the atmosphere was more suited for them, perhaps, and or it could be that I had some sort of actual trauma to my lungs, or a neurological problem that made breathing hard. But he left me with these other humans. They forced me down. I started to resist because they weren't answering. I needed to have some answers,
right?
Some reassurance, and so they forced me onto the table and put a mask over my face. It looked just like a gas mask, like an Earth medical device. And I lost consciousness, and that was all I recalled until I woke up in time to see the craft leaving.
Understood. And Jennifer, were you going to jump in here?
Well, I was just going to point out that this is one of these aspects Travis didn't mention, but I think is really profound and important. As he was walking across this hangar, like he walked out of this UFO craft he saw in the forest. He turned around and looked at it and saw it, and it was a disc, right? And they walked down a ramp and then across what he best describes as like a tarmac in some sort of what's like an aircraft hangar, but we don't know really what they're in. But there are other craft there that he can see. And they're not the disc-shaped craft he walked off of. They're reflective, large, tic-tac-shaped craft, right? Or like egg-shaped craft.
More rounded, not so sharp-edged.
Now, we're only hearing about tic-tacs now in the news, sort of, right? In 2015. He had an experience in 1975.
Right.
So 40 years before, 45 years almost before we hear about Tic Tacs, Travis is talking about them. And I was also going to mention, I sent you a link where there's actually a short little video description. It's what we use. It's the reenactment we did for the Travis film. So if somebody wants to watch this, you can post the link I sent you. It's a little interview I did with him on a local television show, and they opened with this reenactment. I gave them access to the footage, and they decided to use it. So it's about maybe a 3-minute clip, and you hear Travis's voice describing this whole thing he just described, and you can see it in a video graphic description with, literally CGI and artist renditions of these beings and these craft and this environment that he's describing. So I'll let Travis go back to waking up on the side of the street.
Yes. Don't worry. I will definitely post that up on Twitter and multiple websites for everyone out there. Go ahead, Travis.
Well, when I woke up, I could feel the cold air, and I could tell I hadn't been in the cold too long. I could feel the cold, coming up my pant leg and into my clothes. But there was a light above me, and I looked to see where the light was coming from. But it went off before I could look in that direction fully. But then there was a very shiny rounded disc style, hovering there just for an instant before it shot up into the sky. It sort of stirred the air, around me and around the tree there. That tree's still there. It hasn't died or anything yet, but I recognized this piece of highway and the lights of the town down below. I ran down into the town, and the first building, it was all lit up and steam coming out of the chimney or smoke or something. And I pounded on the door and yelled. Nobody came. It might be that they were terrified of somebody screaming and pounding on the door in the middle of the night, or maybe nobody heard me, but nevertheless, I gave up on that and ran on down across the second bridge and found the phone booth that I called my family from. But, you get all kinds of stories, There was the debunker who claimed I was never in that phone booth. There was a friend who said, that, he believed me and everything, but he said the first thing I did when I got to the phone booth was call him because he lived in Heber. And then when I wasn't home, then I called my family. But that's not true. Because of my hysteria and the screaming in my voice and the operator hearing all that, she listened in on the phone call and reported it to the sheriff. There was only one call, but the important point is that there was a call. The debunker was saying that I was never in the phone booth. I was off somewhere else, in his theory, but I was definitely making a phone call from that phone booth to the point where the sheriff sent officers over there to dust for prints or whatever that night. But it was the middle of the night, so they didn't get there as quickly as my family did. And they apparently were still up when I called.
And of course, at that point, they must have just been completely terrified and shocked that they actually are seeing you right in front of them now.
Yeah. My family actually started to hang up on me. They thought I was a prankster. People can be so cruel. During this period of time, there had been a number of prank calls that people thought would amuse themselves. But I convinced them it was me. He didn't hang up on me and said, "I'll get your brother and come and get you."
And Mike, at what point did you learn about Travis finally making that return?
Well, he was returned late that night. I can't remember what time of day it was or what time of night it was, but I heard about it the next evening, and I didn't get to go down there until the following day. But in the movie, they have Travis calling me. That's not the brother-in-law he was calling. I was not Travis's brother-in-law yet. I was a year and a half or so later, but at the time he
that's
called
Hollywood. It's going to shorten up the time span here.
Oh, really? Yeah. Yeah, I was he called his other brother-in-law, his actual brother-in-law at the time. I think it's, you can tell the name if you want. I almost said his name, but yeah.
My sister's husband.
Yes. And so I went down after that to Phoenix, and that's where it takes off when I talked about it before, when I first met him.
But one well-meaning person also was saying, yeah, I believe Travis, but I'm a close friend of the family, and I was at that homecoming party. Well, in the movie, there is a homecoming party, but
yes.
That was Hollywood fiction. Didn't exist. And so he couldn't have been at the party. And there was all kinds of people, whether they were for or against, who would, kind of make up stories to amplify their connection to the story or to the family when it wasn't true.
Yeah, we've got a lot of stories about that, don't we? People pretending to be somebody who knew us.
That's wild. But that scene in the movie that I'm thinking about right now is when you guys it's a big family gathering sort of thing, and Travis seems to have some sort of episode. He goes down, hits the floor, and his back hits like the kitchen table, and syrup goes into his mouth. I thought, well, I'm pretty sure that didn't happen.
That entire scene didn't happen.
Came, but not in front of the whole family.
Yeah, I figured that. I'm pretty sure that was obviously embellished by Hollywood for sure.
Yeah, it was. And the movie played down a lot of things that were very important, and then it fictionalized other things that it just did for effect.
Vic something says in the chat room, so Travis's body was still laying in the grass when Mike drove the truck out of the woods. And that would be yes.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the cases where the debunker was having it both ways. He was saying that the ground was rocky and flying 10 or 15 feet should have bruised me, and my medical exam showed no bruises, but he was saying that the ground was covered with a thick carpet of pine needles that should have burst into flames because of the beam. So he's trying to have it both ways. It was rocky and should have bruised me, and it was a thick carpet of pine needles that should have burst into fire.
And also, if I can interject here, this question from the chat room, keep in mind they were in the middle of the Sitgraves National Forest, so Mike couldn't drive out of the forest because it's several million acres. I mean, I think it's a 40-minute drive down to the nearest town of Heber. So it's 40 minutes before you're really out of the forest. What he did is he just drove up this logging road to what's called the Rim Road, or the top of the ridge. And then he stopped the truck and turned around and decided he had to go back and get Travis. So he hadn't really left the forest. He'd left the vicinity. He drove about, I don't know, quarter of a mile away. So maybe that better answers.
Well, I always try to interject that, because occasionally people have commented on the crew driving off like that as being something less than courageous, and I disagree heartily. Mike did the smartest thing right there. The crew were screaming at him, "Get the son of a bitch moving, let's go, and it would make no sense to try to rescue somebody that they, knew in their gut was already dead.
Presume is dead, right?
Right.
But I give them a lot of credit for turning around and coming back. I mean,
that's got to make you feel good.
A lot of the crew were trying to tell Mike, no, let's not go back. Let's just go to town.
Yeah, Travis,
he insisted that.
Travis, that sort of has to make you feel good that they came back.
Yeah, it does.
Right.
And they were trying to see if they could help.
They also saw the craft leave. I don't know if that was mentioned so far in this radio show.
That helped.
Not so far. Yeah.
Right.
That did happen.
As they were returning, they had kind of driven uphill to the rim road, right? And when they turned the truck around and were then coming back to the site, they were actually heading downhill because this was in a valley, the Turkey Springs.
Yeah. Well, the road was on the side of the hill, but yes.
And I have to ask.
They knew they weren't going to encounter the craft.
No, it was gone. I could tell what it was. A couple of guys saw that. It was just a streak through the air.
But just what horrors my body was going to be in.
Yeah, at that point, all sorts of things must have been going through your head. And I'm curious about what life was like for both of you guys after all this was said and done. Let's say maybe a month or two after the whole incident had taken place. I'm sure things were still pretty much on shaky grounds for everyone, right?
Right. I was preoccupied with the horror of what I had experienced, the shock. But then gradually this constant harassment from the media and from the public started to come through to me, just how serious that was. It was horrible. But, John describes walking down the street and having people yell out, "Murderer!"
Oh, no.
Well, that was before he was returned. A month later, Travis was still traumatized, but I started feeling the harangue of Philip Klass.
And that lasted 40 years.
And that lasted for a while, right?
Almost 40 years. He died in, 2003.
Right.
Yeah. But way up until then, and he's not the only one. I mean, there was several others.
Right.
So,
yeah, after all these years, boys, the story has lived on, and it will continue to long after we are all gone. There's been a lot of praise, and of course, there's been plenty of skeptics out there. And just a few weeks ago, I spoke to Dr. Michael Shermer, who both of you are quite familiar with. In fact, I brought up the case and mentioned Travis, and I have audio of what he said. And Travis, would you be interested in hearing that?
Well, yeah.
Okay, Travis. And Jennifer, I assume you haven't heard this. And Mike?
I have not.
Okay.
I've heard it.
Mike has heard it. I did play it for him. And here it goes. It's about... How long is this clip? It's only about 1 minute and 11 seconds. So I'm just going to play the whole thing. You ready, Travis?
Yeah.
Are you guys ready?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. I'll let it rip. Here we go. Have interviewed a man by the name of Mike Rogers multiple times, and he, of course, was the driver and witness to the Travis Walton abduction, and they also made the film a fire in the sky based on this sort of event. I'm sure you've seen the film or heard of it a number of times. Yes.
Yeah, I know. I've met Travis Walton. He came to my office actually one day for filming for a TV show.
Oh, interesting.
And I was on another set with him where it was one of these reality shows on the lie detector. So one of the episodes was they gave him a lie detector. And he volunteered to do it. He thought he'd pass. And at the end of the show, he ended up failing.
Wow. I'm going to have to.
I think he made it up. I think this is what we think the UFO people think. I mean, UFO skeptics think he was late to finish his job and he just concocted the story. And it was probably not meant to be a big public thing. It was probably just, just to get out of this job problem he was having. But then it took off, and then he had to live the lie. I mean, I hate to call him a liar. I don't know for sure, but that's what I think. He asked me my opinion. I think he made it up. And
that was the clip, Travis.
Yeah, well, okay.
Go ahead, Travis.
He's the liar.
Yeah.
Because he knows damn good and well that show was a fraud.
Right. It's important to know
that show, the polygraph show, never passed a single guest. Everyone failed. That was the examiner's job. And he was using methods that are totally against anything proper with polygraphy. And Michael Shermer knows this. He knows that the show was under attack from a group of polygraph examiners, Global Polygraph from New York, attacking the show, saying that they could never have gotten any results better than flipping a coin with the methods that they were using. Mm-hmm. Commenting on the show was also the author of the premier textbook on polygraph, Dr. David Raskin, saying that the show was a fraud and faulty methods.
This has been explained in detail to Michael Shermer, and I told him that I wouldn't talk about all the times that he had been in deep trouble for having intoxicated and drugged women in order to have sex with them. Now, this was already made public by other people in connection with the skeptics organization that he's a part of. But somebody that would drug women in order to have sex with them is not my idea of an honest person. This guy's a creep.
Allegedly.
I offered him the opportunity. Look, say anything you want about me of a skeptical nature. But if you're going to harp on that fraudulent show when you know I've already presented the evidence to you, if you're going to keep up with that, then we're going to talk about your date rape.
Alleged date rape. Yes, allegedly. I don't want you to get in trouble now.
Well, I'm not the one alleging it. I'm reading what was made public already.
My goodness, we might have a lawsuit on our hands here. But yes, allegedly.
No, these women already made it public. I'm just reporting that they made it public.
Yes. I'll also tell you that for the documentary that I made, I spoke with the head of the National Polygraph Association. His name is Nate Gordon. At the time when, he wasn't exactly the head of it during the time when I filmed him, but he had just stepped down from the post about a year before, and he was in Philadelphia. So, this Professional Polygraph Association is actually international, but certainly very strong nationally. And he would have gladly commented on this television show and told you the nature of how they set their pieces up. But I figured that I couldn't get access to the footage without paying a huge amount of money to own it. And I felt maybe I should address it. It was something David Jacobs said, you got to address this, this fake polygraph that they did, because people are going to comment on it. It's going to come back and bite you in the butt. And honestly, it was just too expensive to address, to really buy the archived film footage, because they charge you like $250,000 for a minute and a half of this footage.
The polygraph examiner was a crook and totally discredited. Like I said, he never passed anybody. That was his job. I mean, they're baiting people in there with a $500,000 payoff.
Right.
Oh,
And he
so-
may not
of
have
course,
actually been
his job
a
is to
legal
make sure they don't pay
polygraph member.
all this money to anybody. But I was a fool. But nevertheless, I did pass 2 polygraph tests after that.
That sounds like James
See,
Randi.
I've passed 5 altogether by legitimate examiners with years of interrogation experience in law enforcement, not this phony guy that was working for this TV show. I passed 2 more with a much more modern equipment, 5-trace machine. Did work for the Albuquerque Police Department, the New Mexico State Prisons, and even the U.S. Marshals. That's who he was doing work for. I passed 2 tests from him after
I see.
this phony polygraph show.
By the way,
I think
Travis,
it's kind of a cheap shot for somebody that knows damn good and well that was not a legitimate polygraph, that every bona fide expert has discredited it, and he knows it. And then to just flat out say, I think he made it up. I think he made it up. What do you mean I made it up?
well,
What about the other 6 guys?
I was going to say, yeah, well, he doesn't exactly explain everything, but I was just going to quickly add, so you do know what TV show he's talking about, correct?
Yeah.
Well, what was the name of the TV show? Because I don't even know. I never heard that.
It wasn't aired here, was it, Travis? In
Or
the
was
States, it was like had
It was
one airing
a
in
short-lived show
Europe.
because
Oh, okay.
they were being sued 6 ways from Sunday.
Oh, my goodness. But yes, it is a little unusual that Dr. Michael Shermer kind of straight out just said that about you. I was a little bit shocked. That's why I was kind of laughing there. I couldn't believe that.
Well, that's the reason he deserves to be outed about those charges that others
Oh, my.
leveled against him concerning date rape, drugs, and alcohol, and whatever. I guess it's a kind of a bad habit that he had there for a while, but I don't think that it's fair at all for him to be using stuff that he knows is not valid to try to
that
discredit it.
Shermer has agreed to come on my show.
With these debunkers, these skeptics, they use stuff that if you had the complete story, you know how stupid they look and how dishonest they look. To say, well, it was all a drug hallucination. Well, they conveniently leave out the fact that I had blood and urine samples put to the Maricopa County Medical Examiner's drug screen. Showed no trace of any drug. But you see, I have to go through this law enforcement drug test
Yeah.
to prove something that was stupid on the face of it to start with. 7 people do not have the same hallucination.
Well, there is something called like a collective apparition or a mass hallucination, but in this case, I could pretty much rule
I've never heard
that
of
out.
one where you go into every single detail and
Yeah, that's
everything's
You got me there. Yeah,
Hallucinations are always rather vague.
true. But that's just what the skeptics would say, and I am an open-minded skeptic by nature, and so this is also another reason why I've always been interested in this case, because it's always been one that I couldn't really poke too many holes through, to be completely honest with all of you.
No. And Michael Shermer, by the way, even though I listened to this program that you had it with him here,
He's going to listen to
a week
this.
and a half ago.
He's going to listen to this, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have since called him, texted him, and he said that he would come on my show, my new show,
Excellent.
if I would not talk about the Phoenix Lights or Travis Walton.
Oh, okay. Well, then he's not going to be on then. Obviously, he said that.
pre-censorship.
Yeah, I've since texted him back,
Okay.
emailed him back, and tried to talk to him since and to him, telling me, okay, I will not talk about Travis Walton, but my whole purpose for being on that show is to talk about the Phoenix Lights.
He was kind of being a dick right there. I could say that to you right now, honestly. He won't get too mad at me for saying that, but that's what he was being a dick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think he debunks a lot of things. He just likes. I mean, he's lit. People understand he is a skeptic. He debunks afterlife. Life after life experiences as well, and he's he's found his niche, and people who know him know that's what his approach is.
He's a paid skeptic. I mean, I like the guy, but I do know that he does have his own confirmation bias, as we all tend to do and tend to have.
Well,
Sure.
I think it's possible to be skeptical and analyze claims in an objective way, but he's not objective. I mean, he just doesn't even point to any facts. He just says, well, he made it up. He made it up.
Well,
Yeah.
What
Do you
mean?
remember what Stan
You know?
used to say? There's regular tactics that are employed, and when you see these tactics, it defines the person who's spouting them out. They don't do any research. It's all by proclamation, right? Can you remember all of them, Travis? I'm trying to remember them
Well,
off the top of my head.
there was
Don't
a whole
bother me with the
slew of them
facts.
that Philip
My
Glass
mic's made
made
up.
that were proven to be fraudulent. He was actually fraudulent in claiming that these the things that had occurred that had not occurred. But, he was just throwing everything at it, all of the above,
I'm going to play the clip one more time for those who are just joining in right now, just to cement this in the minds of those who are just joining in. I'm sure we can all agree to hear this one more time.
yeah.
Yeah, let's hear this one more time. I have interviewed a man by the name of Mike Rogers multiple times, and he, of course, was the driver and witness to the Travis Walton abduction, and they also made the film A Fire in the Sky based on this sort of event. I'm sure you've seen the film or heard of it a number of times, yes.
Yeah, I know. I've met Travis Walton. He came to my office actually one day for filming for a TV show.
Oh, interesting.
And I was on another set with him where it was one of these reality shows on the lie detector. So one of the episodes was they gave him a lie detector. And he volunteered to do it. He thought he'd pass. And at the end of the show, he ended up failing.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to...
I think he made it up. I think this is what we think the UFO people think. I mean, UFO skeptics think he was late to finish his job and he just concocted the story. And it was probably not meant to be a big public thing. It was probably just.
I had to pause it right there. He says you made it up because of the job, because you were late? I'm not sure where he gets that from, Travis.
It wasn't even
Philip
Travis' job.
Philip Glass was saying that, well, Mike said that we were behind on the contract, but that's no big deal. And, that happens quite regularly. Probably most of the contracts we worked on weren't according to schedule, but that's no big deal. We just get a contract extension.
What was that,
They
Jennifer?
never give you enough time. That's the problem. They always they give you just barely enough time if everything goes right. And I've actually defaulted on 2 contracts before that. So they made a big deal of the time schedule, and that's not the way it goes in those jobs. It's not like that at all.
Yeah, if you don't finish the job, you don't get paid. You don't get out of the contract, or you don't get your money and not have to.
But see, the
job.
dishonest thing about what Michael Shermer was doing is knowing that I had passed multiple polygraph tests with good, solid examiners, and then the show that he knows has been discredited by the top experts in the field, and he doesn't even mention that. He's being deceptive. He is lying. He's trying to act like, well, anything that casts any doubt on it, those are good tests. Any test that you pass, the top examiners in the world, nothing's perfect, but
what this
5
reminds
tests
me
I passed from law enforcement interrogators, and he knows that I've passed those tests, and he doesn't mention that. He mentions a test that he knows was thoroughly discredited by every polygraph examiner in the business. I'm talking about the whole group of global polygraph people, kind of a giant union of them, were filing charges and attacking them in the media before I was ever on the show. And the author of the premier textbook on polygraph totally dismissing that as incapable of giving legitimate I could go into a lot more details about, what is proper procedure and how they violated that. It was just totally ridiculous how everything they did was designed to make it not come out truthful.
Amazing. Go ahead, Jennifer. You were saying something there.
Well, we cover a section of this in the film too, where we really address Phil Klass. And Phil tried to maneuver and pull a very similar tactic. In fact, it was Mike's idea, I think, that the boys would all retake a polygraph test because Philip was saying it wasn't a legitimate test that they took.
Yeah,
on the
we challenged him. We challenged him. Okay, you pay for it if we pass. We pay for it if we don't. If you're so confident that we're not going to pass polygraph test, then accept the challenge. You got nothing to lose.
The boys all got together, sent a letter off to Philip Klass. They all signed it, and they said, "We'll take another test, but it has to be a certified polygraph examiner that you will agree on and we agree on, because you can't set us up with a fake one like this television show did. It has to be a legitimate, accepted polygraph examiner, and we'll all take the test." And Philip finally backed out of it because he couldn't really meet the challenge, and he knew it, and he knew he would fail. So he never accepted the challenge.
All right, I'm gonna hit the rest of this clip here. Let's play the audio.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to.
I think he made it up. I think this is what we think the UFO people think. I mean, UFO skeptics think he was late to finish his job, and he just concocted the story. And it was probably not meant to be a big public thing. It was probably just to get out of this job problem he was having. But then it took off, and then he had to live the lie. I mean, I hate to call him a liar. I don't know for sure, but that's what I think. He asked me my opinion. I think he made it up.
Amazing. Live the lie, Travis.
Yeah, wonderful guy.
Yeah.
He's the one who's living a lie.
Amazing.
That's right.
Being a skeptic
it's more like
very
he's had
often
to live
is
the
living
truth.
a lie because they have to cover up positive evidence. If you want to discredit something, you stack the evidence to the negative. He just gathers everything and selectively covers up the things that would pass in any court of law.
I think
in a court of law, that TV show was bunk. In a court of law, the tests that we took from law enforcement polygraph examiners, those are the true professionals. And
yes,
that's what would hold up in court. But these people aren't scientific, they're not rational, and they're not fair.
By the way,
set out to, and just say,
yes.
I think he made it up. On the basis of what? He points to nothing except a fraudulent TV show. So that makes me point to these charges that these women brought against him for date rape.
Amazing. The only way I feel like we could only settle this is of course, if I bring in Dr. Michael Shermer and have you here, Travis, so you can both finally talk to each other.
The actual publication and quotations from the women, if he cares to hear them. I told him, talk all the skeptical crap you want, but don't be promoting that false polygraph show, because damn good and well that's a fraud. And yet he come back and did it again in your face, Travis. Well, okay, let's talk about your date rape. Come on the show, Mr. Shermer. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think this is the only way we are going to be able to settle this sort of indifferences we have here, and put our words to use here, and hopefully we could talk through these things. Maybe you can convince him that you aren't making this story up, that you are telling the truth wholeheartedly, you and Mike here, and this is something that you both saw. It wasn't something made up. You both experienced this, and Travis's pain is real.
Nothing is ever going to convince Michael Shermer of anything.
I was going to say the same thing. It depends on whose payroll is he on. There is a lot of evidence that most likely Philip Klass was on someone's payroll for years with the intent to debunk this. I spent quite a bit of time in the Philadelphia Philosophical Society with Stanton Friedman and Kathy Martin looking at Phil Klass's files there. and the letters that went back and forth between him and the head of the astronomy department at Harvard, Donald Menzel, and Mr. Condon, and other people involved, well-known, involved in debunking UFO stories or covering them up. There was intimate conversations that went back and forth, and vacations that they spent with each other. And of course, Philip Glass ended up offering a bribe.
The term debunk is even fair, because they're not removing bunk at all. They're spewing bunk in order to discredit.
Right.
Very interesting. Yes,
If you're going to spend your time trying to discredit a debunker, there's far more what's the right word? Intelligent things you could do with your time. I don't mean that in any way to be a discredit to you, Michael Decon, but I think you have to look at the bigger picture.
I've heard worse. Don't worry.
Well, I have a copy of, through the Freedom of Information Act, of the FBI file on Philip Glass, and they thought he was irrational, and they were highly critical of him in a variety of ways, that he was basically dishonest. They were investigating him for having released what do you call it?
He'd had
releasing material that was not supposed to be released.
In one of his
that's
I see.
Classified material.
Classified material. Thank you.
Classified's the word. Dang it. Yeah, he was releasing classified information in connection with his job as editor of Aviation Week and Space Technology. And in the end, this memo that's in the file is basically the director of the FBI turning the investigation and the evidence over to the director of the Central Intelligence Agency. This is an actual memo signed by J. Edgar Hoover to the director of the Central Intelligence Agency at a time when it was so secret that they didn't use the name of the director on an internal memo. It's just J. Edgar Hoover to Director, Central Intelligence Agency, basically turning their research over to the CIA. We'll maintain these files. We can hold it over his head, and basically that's what turned him into a CIA asset, and that's where the $10,000 bribe came from that Philip Glass offered Steve Pierce. $10,000 bribe. Now these Michael Shermer types are happy to use Philip Glass type crap that he spewed out there. It's been totally discredited. And he's been discredited as a person. The FBI had investigated him a number of times.
Right. And by the way, Travis, do you think you could take Dr. Michael Shermer in a fight? Just a side note.
I certainly could.
You think you could take him?
Oh, yeah.
I think you might. I think you probably can.
I can hardly walk anymore, and I can kick his ass.
You could take him out, Mike. Amazing.
No, my first 4 amateur bouts were won by knockout.
Oh, Michael better be careful.
Yeah, he better.
I not only called a knockout, they were knocked off of their feet.
Oh, damn. Oh, yes. And of course, this brings me to certain.
But I'm not threatening him.
I know.
I'm challenging him to fight. If he wants to get onto a debate and discuss date rape and fake polygraph tests and the evidence that he's covered up, fine. Get out there. Let's get with it.
I was just trying to.
I'll ask him straight out. Why are you hiding the positive polygraph test?
Right.
With legitimate examiners and hyping one that was totally discredited by every single examiner to the point where the show was canceled. It was so bad.
When I asked you about the fight, I was just trying to get you to pop a little bit there, Travis.
Right. Michael here and I are trying very hard to get Michael Shermer on. I have challenged him a number of times, and Michael here knows the result. And recently, he, in spite of my saying, he would, come on my show, come on Michael's show, come on whatever. And I challenged him to go on KGRA with me. And
there's no
Michael Shermer
excuse to throw out the
I don't have
fake
the time.
polygraph and bury and hide the good stuff.
Amazing.
There's no excuse for that except to deceive the public and lie about me to discredit me in a negative way. I am not bringing out anything false when I talk about these women who come forward and challenged him. This was during meetings that they had with their Skeptics Association, I guess. But I'll be happy to refresh everybody's memory about that if he wants to keep talking about a fake polygraph test.
Right.
And try to cover up legitimate tests that the examiner stands by to this day.
I throw a bottle right now. I'm sorry if anyone heard that. I got angry. I got fired up, not angry.
Honestly, if you want my opinion,
go ahead,
haven't
Jennifer.
asked for it, but I'm
I do want your
throw
opinion.
it right in here.
Do it.
I think there's so much important information to digest about Travis's story and about the UFO topic in general.
Right.
That to spend your time trying to debunk a debunker, it's to me, it's kind of like just a wasted
Do you think
bit
it's
of energy.
counterproductive?
They're not even worth it. And there's so many much more.
I can guarantee you he's not going to want to come on and on an even footing and discuss these matters openly.
Well, you'll be surprised. I think
if we
you
can
might.
talk about fake polygraph shows and use that as evidence, we can certainly talk about the charges of date rape.
I think we could convince him to come in here. I think, I've talked to him enough.
Yeah.
I think
between
I
you and
here.
Michael, I think we can.
I think I could drag him in here.
Yeah.
Well, good luck, but I'll be happy to do so if he'll answer questions,
I'll
not
let him know.
Weasel around.
Yeah.
Oh, did we lose you?
I don't know what happened to him, but Michael, I think we got a plan here. We have a plan we haven't even talked about yet.
Oh, it said call failed.
Between you and me.
It says call failed disconnected.
Yeah,
Wow.
it probably dropped off. Maybe he can, or maybe he just bumped his phone by mistake.
I think he either bumped his phone or the call just dropped completely, but we could definitely give him a call back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess you would have to do that, right?
Yes, let's give him a little ring here. He was so fired up.
Do you have the number saved?
Yeah, yes. I was going to
Remember what we were going to do with Dr. Kate? Remember that plan?
Yeah, I do.
Well, we could do the same thing with Michael Shermer.
Well, that's true, but I think he's more than willing to come on.
Maybe he is on yours. He doesn't want to come on mine if we talk about anything important.
Well,
he'd be happy to come on my show as long as we don't discuss certain things.
And we lost him.
Yeah.
We did lose him, but we are running out of time. That's another thing that I was going to mention. We only have about 25 minutes left here on the program, and I was going to ask Travis and both of you if you've been following the latest news in ufology. Of course, you have To the Stars Academy, who's been making a big wave. I did want all of your opinions, but of course, I'm trying to get a hold of Travis here.
Well, we could talk while you're trying.
Yeah, go ahead.
What were you saying, Jennifer, first?
I was saying, yes, I have been following To the Stars, and I think that they have done a lot of good to separate fact from fiction and to bring out the important new ways in which we need to look at the UFO topic. In fact, gosh, they've gotten the Navy to do an about face and finally come forward and say pilots are allowed to report UFOs. I guess they thought like a year and a half after their pilots did report stuff and footage was released, it was time to come clean and allow those pilots the privilege of reporting the material, since it was released by Luis Elizondo in the New York Times on December 16th. But I think, like what I love about TSA is they've come up with important terminology. They've come up with 5 new categories to define UFO activity. Instantaneous acceleration, something that demonstrates supersonic speeds or hypervelocity. Around 3,000 miles per second. That's significant. It has no known, visible propulsion systems. It appears to have some kind of anti-gravitic abilities.
Right.
No traditional aircraft, has things like that. It's a non-traditional shape aircraft, like a disc. It has cloaking abilities. It appears and disappears, and it has trans-medium travel abilities. So it goes underwater, up in the air, into outer space seamlessly and instantaneously. So, these are things that when we're talking about UFOs, we have to really, let's hone in to the specifics. This is what they're saying is important. And they're also saying if we don't consider that to be a threat to our national military, then maybe we ought to. So I think what they're doing is they're bringing out to the news medias, and the news media is covering it more seriously than ever before, the real specific core meat of this topic. And
yeah, Jennifer, have you ever considered the idea that what they're releasing recently is all they have, or nearly all they have?
No, this is the tip of the iceberg. And I'll tell you, I hosted Luis Elizondo. I ran the National Symposium for MUFON in 2018 in Philadelphia. And I had the chance to speak privately with Luis. And of course, I heard him speak openly. And he had to be very, very guarded with his words, with his descriptions, what he discussed, what he didn't discuss. And the whole article that came out on December 16th, that was a very orchestrated process with the media. This wasn't just a little fly-by-night article. The New York Times was researching this over a year, and there were contracts back and forth and emails and discussions with who would be the one to release it. Actually, George Knapp was about to release stuff like this, and he was actually phoned by Senator Harry Reid and said, no, let the New York Times release it. This has got to be orchestrated. We'll do a private interview with you like a week later, so you'll have a special bird in your back pocket. But Glass was fit to be tied. George Knapp, he was ready to release this, and really quite frustrated that he wasn't going to be able to. So to come out and finally begin to bring the real facts to the surface is huge. And this was deliberate, and it was orchestrated by people inside military secret programs that want this information out. They think it's about time.
And it's a trickle.
It's a trickle.
Yes. And by the way, we might have lost Travis, by the way. I've been calling him nonstop. I think he might have just left the room. Or
if he was still listening and on the call, he might have bumped his mute phone, but then he'd hear us talking. So
Vanessa in the chat room says Travis got abducted again.
I can try to text him a little bit.
Yeah, you go ahead if you want.
And I'll let Michael talk a little bit, or Mike Rogers, if he wants to talk about what his opinion of, the Nimitz footage, December 16th, and even what's come out since then. Kevin Day has had a lot to say as well, the radar operator.
Yeah, Mike, we've got about 20 minutes or so, Mike. I think we could handle this, my friend. And yes, lots of things going on with To the Stars Academy with Tom DeLonge, of all people. I've never thought that he would be leading the way, but he has done some good. I've been quite critical of the whole thing, merely because the government has done this sort of thing before, where they set out these people with the whole disinformation sort of mission. Yeah, really. And that's where my mind goes to when I think of this camp now aligning themselves with the government and the Army, whatever it is, the Navy now, whatever it is. I'm just a little bit concerned if this is actually a legit thing, or if this is something that is being used as disinfo. Mike, I think you might be aligned with that view as well.
Well, I have a whole lot of theories. actual more than theories. I have proof. In fact, I have a completely different concept about debunkers, and I've said some of that on your show and
Right.
on several other shows. I believe now, and the further we go into the future, the more I'm convinced that Philip Klass was not really a debunker. He was a pseudo debunker, and everybody says no. He wasn't just a debunker. He was terribly egotistical. Well, yeah, sure, but I think it was an act. I really do, because everything he had to say against us could be put down very easily, just simply by being a little bit smart and seeing that what he was saying was just completely off track. And he said things that could have been said that were very much harder to prove, but he said things that were easy to prove. And one of those examples is he had this thing that he said right there on Larry King Live, and in his book, more than one book, and he said that he had he talked about this conversation where he doesn't say where it came from. What it came from was from Bill Berry's book, which is called The Ultimate Encounter. It was a book that actually came out a few months before our book, The Walton Experience, came out. And in that book, Bill Berry's book, there's this where Bill Berry quoted this conversation between Steve Pierce and I, where Steve Pierce had called me on the phone, or I'd called him. Anyway, it was recorded, and I asked Steve Pierce, are you really going to take this money? And even though it really happened. And Steve said, I was thinking about it, and so I said, well, then you're going to be bruised, and you'll spend the money alone. Well, right there in Bill Berry's book, there's proof of what was actually said. The whole conversation is there. But in Phil Klass's book and on Larry King Live, he says that he leaves out that very, very important line, even though this really happened. He leaves that completely out. It changed the entire tone, the entire meaning of that conversation. And you can just imagine what it was like without that. Another way Phil Klass said it, Steve Pierce and Mike Rogers had this conversation, and Mike says, "Are you going to take that money?" And this is the way Phil Klass says it. And Steve says, "Yeah, I was thinking about it." Well, then you're going to be bruised. See, he just left out that most important part and made it look like I was trying to intimidate him. I was mad because why? Because in Phil Klass's mind, it was all a lie. And I feel Steve was thinking about ratting us out,
Mike, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I believe we have Travis back on the line.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
What's up, Travis?
Yeah, that was a real significant fraud of Philip Klass's, to take a quotation and actually alter it in order to reverse its meaning. Oh man, what a sneaky!
Amazing.
Oh, he did that a lot. I read the letter transcripts back and forth, like almost 10 years of them between Mike Rogers. Yeah, and
a couple of books worth.
It is.
He just conveniently leaves out, even though it really happened, and would do it just for the money.
Right, and Mike, Travis, while you were gone, we were talking about the latest sort of mainstream media frenzy with ufology, and the latest coming from To the Stars Academy with Tom DeLonge, frontman of Blink-182 of all people. I never thought I'd be saying this, but he's been doing quite well. I would have to say, give him some credit, but I've also been sort of weary anytime the government gets involved, more so than I would like them to. And as we know, these things have been going on. The CIA is also someone who's been a part of disinformation for many, many years. If you look back through history, you could see this for yourself. It's out there. It's something that they had made up in the past plenty of times.
It's my belief that they were the ones bankrolling the $10,000 bribe that Klass offered to Steve.
Well, there you go. So it's hard for me to trust the government with this sort of thing because they lied before. So I think, well, why aren't they lying about this now? Why would they just be so open about this subject that they've lied time and time again before?
You know, it's possible that they've seen the error of their ways. You know,
Maybe.
They were focusing on discrediting the witnesses, and it turns out that all they were succeeding in doing is discrediting themselves. People were starting to not believe the government. So they figured, we'd better just take a different tact. So that December 16th release of the Navy jet gunfighter, gun camera footage was released on a Friday afternoon, which is what is done when you want minimum impact. You want it out there, but you want it to have as little impact as possible. News release late on a Friday, it dies down before Monday rolls around.
Interesting. And of course...
Yeah, but that isn't the end result, though.
Yes.
This has remained. It has become mainstream now. For a year now, they keep showing it over and over. And the thing of it is, that isn't mistrusting the government. That's actual footage. That it constitutes proof.
Yeah, I'm hearing your skepticism, Michael.
Sure, I'm
Decon.
sure you do. Yes.
And I don't know that I can really accurately address it. But
well, I mean, we're basing it off of footage that's extremely grainy and extremely hard to tell.
Oh no! This is
footage.
Gun footage.
But you would expect to have better footage than that.
No, this what you're looking at is infrared footage and special camera footage that hones down and takes in data. There is other footage, but that wasn't released.
But why
the footage
not?
that you're looking at is very specific radar imagery footage.
Yeah, but why haven't we seen the better, clear, high-def imagery or video of said
Because
craft?
you're only getting a trickle.
Well, I can postulate that possibly it would compromise military advantages, to let them know just exactly how good our Navy gun camera footage is.
It's very similar to footage that's been released even by Mexico.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, more than our government.
And I don't really look at TSA as an official government release. These are people who have worked in high levels of government. I mean, Chris Mellon was a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, under Clinton and Bush. And Luis Elizondo left his post. He worked for the Pentagon with the Advanced Aerial Threat Detection Program. So he's out of the government. Steve Justice used to work for a program with Lockheed Martin, but not specifically with the government. And Hal Puthoff, he was up at Stanford. It's at the Stanford Research Institute doing psychic research and things like that. So the only other one is Jim Semivan. He was the former Central Intelligence Agency senior member. But these people have left their posts. Now they have still some friends and some contacts, but the disclosure they are making is not the government making the disclosure. They have negotiated with the government. This is what Luis Elizondo did before he left his post. The release of that footage was negotiated when he left the Pentagon, and people inside the Pentagon said, yes, you can release the footage and you can release the story. And he got permission to do it.
Amazing. And of course, there was Edward Snowden, who recently made comments as well. He said that the government doesn't have any footage, or not footage, I should say, any data, anything on file rather, about UFOs or ET. And it's quite interesting that he made that comment on Joe Rogan's podcast. Really, I don't really listen to that, but someone sent me a clip and I did hear that. Did you happen to hear that sort of clip yourself, Jennifer?
Well, I'll tell you that I did not hear that clip, but I know well from being a good friend of Nick Pope's that government certainly research this material and keep it and try to evaluate it. And they actually have a formula or a theory to evaluate these threats. Basically, they look at it first and say, okay, does this UAP or UFO demonstrate some sort of superior maneuverability? Can it outpace our jets? Is it, a higher technology than we have? And then the second major question they ask strategically is, does it demonstrate any kind of intent to harm us? Does it attack us first, or is it evasive? Well, clearly, the interactions we have had for decades have been evasive. It's the higher intelligence species here that's controlling disclosure. They don't want to, let their technologies out. They don't want to really interact with us, but they do engage with us enough to let us know that they are kind of in control, meaning that they will take out Minuteman missiles, which they did all throughout the 60s. They will go after missiles when we shoot them up. And this military exercise that was going on with the Nimitz in 2004 off the coast of California, that wasn't one incident. Well, what we get in the news is this dribble down effect, and we think, okay, there was one encounter with one jet, and they filmed this thing on their gun footage, and they locked onto it, and it went down to the ocean floor and then back up into the sky instantaneously. There wasn't one thing, and it wasn't one day.
Yeah, I've seen multiple.
There were hundreds of UFOs, and it went on over a whole week, and they had to cancel their maneuvers.
Yeah, that's one thing I was going to quickly.
These were exercises going on, and they got canceled for the whole week. And then the same thing happened again on the East Coast in 2016 or 17. So,
yeah, I've seen that sort of footage from various places and locations as well of a craft of such going into the water and back out. Pretty interesting, I would say.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
I don't exactly. I'm not challenging that at all, because I clearly see that for myself. I'm just wanting better footage of it. That's all.
Well, I think what most people really want is for the government to come loose with everything. That's what they've been wanting forever. But the thing of it is, that's not going to happen. And people now are not really taking seriously what's really going on. This trickling disclosure, everybody's kind of poo-pooing that. Well, this is the real thing.
By the way, this reminds me of a conversation I briefly had with Gary McKinnon. If you maybe recall who he is. He's listened he's listened to the show a number of times, and going back to what he discovered when he hacked military computers, the biggest of all time, back in 2001, and he made claims of finding all sorts of data on anti-gravity technology, suppression of free energy, and even made claims of seeing crafts that did not look man-made. And, I would assume if these claims were true, and he did get arrested after all, and he did do time, and his life was turned upside down because of this, and he wouldn't even appear on this program because of his life being turned upside down because of the hacking that he did. I would have to assume the U.S. government and military would have to change some of their protocol, and of course, maybe not store those sort of files on any computer. That's what I personally think. So if Edward Snowden did do some exploring, I'm pretty sure he probably wouldn't find anything of that nature on any computer. That's just my theory, though. I could be wrong.
Well, he certainly did the government a favor, Gary McKinnon, because he let them know how easy it was for them to discover some of this information. Whether or not we are really off planet, as people like Michael Salla writes about, and even Richard Dolan says there's probably a breakaway society that's going on. If that exists, it's very hard for the mainstream, you and I, to deal with that when we're still debating whether or not Travis's polygraph on the TV show was real. Maybe you get my drift here. There are very, very serious things that we need to begin to digest and understand as a public and take seriously. And if we're going to spend our time focused on whether or not a polygraph was real when we know it was fake, we're kind of barking down the wrong tree. But I think that, yes, there are some serious questions we need to look at. And many people are fearful that what is coming out now with people like people in the TSA, that we're being set up. I mean, they have a whole television show now called Unacknowledged, right? Where all these TSA guys are on the show and they're talking about their research. Are we being set up with a public mindset to be prepared for some kind of false flag situation?
I don't think so.
Where we could be then forced to fight against some sort of invading enemy, but it might be like a false flag. And it's a way to kind of unite us all and get us all to focus on a bigger picture, because we all have to be united.
Amazing.
No,
and we
I don't think that's what it is at all.
Well, I have no idea, but this is some of the theories that have been floated around.
right.
I just got off a cruise where I sat up and spoke very, very late with well, I didn't think you didn't get up to the top deck, Travis, did you? With Linda Howe and some of the other people.
That's the trouble with some of these ridiculous conspiracy theories, is that it makes real conspiracies easier to hide. Because all you got to do is say, "Oh, that's a conspiracy theory," and then your conspiracy is all covered up.
Right.
That's right.
And I regret to say this, but we definitely are out of time here. I wish we could talk even longer. It's been a delightful conversation with you three. And as we close this up for this evening, Jennifer, I want to start with you. Any parting ways before we close up? I definitely want you to plug any of the events that we briefly spoke about. Go ahead and do that now.
I'll just mention anyone who lives in the New York City area. Tomorrow there will be a screening in honor of the 44th anniversary of Travis's experience. We'll screen the Travis film with the group in New York called Disclosure Network New York. It's dnny.info. It's Nick Curto, and he will be screening the film tomorrow. And then Travis will do a Q&A via Skype. After that, I'll be on introducing it ahead of time. So that's something coming up. Also, next Wednesday, on the actual anniversary, the 44th anniversary, Travis Walton and I and Mike Rogers on Tuesday, we'll be on the Alan Smith radio show on KGRA. Paranormal now. So those are important things. And if people listening want to see the film, they can buy it from Travis's website at traviswalton.com, or they can go to traviswaltonthemovie.com. They can buy a DVD there too, or they can click on a link with Amazon and stream the film on Amazon to see it if they're interested. So those are the most important things to let people know.
Amazing. It's been an honor and pleasure to talk to you, Jennifer. And Mike, go ahead. Any closing thoughts or opinions, any final words, basically? Go ahead. Stage is yours.
Well, I have this new show, of course, which I had last night, and we're going to be doing that show every week. It comes on KGRA. It's called The Realist, and it's going to be 10 to midnight Eastern. And I think that's somewhere around either 7 or 8 o'clock Mountain Standard Time for a start. And basically what that is it's what Michael Shermer isn't, or what UFO gurus are not. It's kind of like in the middle of the road. In other words, I'm a believing realist, not a skeptic. And that's exactly what the show's about. And it's for the purpose of unraveling nonsense. The other people, everybody seems to be pitted one way or the other. They're either a Michael Shermer or they're a total believer like that. And they talk about the middle of the road, but very few people ever see it or do it. That's exactly what I intend to do with this show. And you're going to see some surprising things as a result, but that's what's going on. And of course, like Jennifer mentioned, we're going to be on air there on KGRA this coming Tuesday. I believe that's at 10 to midnight. I think it is. And it's called Paranormal Now with Alan B. Smith. And that's the 44th actual commemoration of the event that happened right on that date, November 5th. So that's coming up.
Right. And Travis is also going to speak for Phoenix MUFON on December 7th. So anyone in the Phoenix area, if they want to see and meet Travis and hear him speak, he'll be there with Phoenix MUFON.
Amazing.
And my final words are just, if you're going to judge any of this stuff, get the facts first. Make sure they're actually facts, and make sure you have all the facts. And then, if you don't know good reasoning practices, logical, critical thinking, then the facts aren't going to do you any good anyway.
Oh, yes. And Travis, I do want to thank you tremendously also for being a part of the program. It's been a great time, and hopefully we could do this again, but next time with Dr. Michael Shermer.
Hopefully. Maybe.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Hopefully I could convince him to jump in here. And Jennifer, of course, I do want you to return as well. And we could talk about all sorts of things going on with you. And Mike, the same thing. I mean, all of you guys could return again. Let's just be realistic here. It was fun.
Nice.
Did you guys have fun?
Oh, it was a lot of fun.
You bet.
Did you have
We
fun?
covered a lot of ground tonight.
We sure did. Travis, did you have fun out there?
Oh, it was a blast.
Oh, I loved it. Oh, I loved it. This was great. And I can't wait to do this again with all of you.
Well,
Yeah.
Thanks for giving us the opportunity, Mike.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. And I want all of you to be safe. And of course, I look forward to the next time we do this.
All right.
Good.
See you later.
All right. God bless all of you.
Good night.
All right. Good night.
Night.
And there they go, boys and girls. That was Mr. Mike Rogers and, of course, Mr. Travis Walton. Love talking to all of them, and Jennifer as well. Jennifer Stein. Great, great people. Love talking to all of them. And, of course, love seeing all of you in the chat room as well. So much fun. Definitely want to thank them again for being a part of the program, and all of you. And the international listeners out there as well, those in the UK, those in Germany, France, and Canada. Love the Canadians out there as well. And definitely want to thank the Fringe FM. And don't forget, if you do like the program and you are a fan, why not sign up for Patreon, where you can find bonus content if you do like this program. And trust me, it's good. It's really good. It's worth the price. I promise, boys and girls. And yes, that's a lovely song playing in the background now. This is just for the hardcore listeners out there, and I've been very happy to report that the Patreon has been doing quite well. Quite well. The shows so far have been fantastic, and if you are a fan, don't be shy. Patreon.com/Michael Decon. Oh, yeah. That was amazing. Do we have neighbors in the cosmos, or is their existence no more than a mirror of our fantasies, folks? I don't know. What do you think? I'm Michael Decon, and with that said, the world is a mysterious place, and life itself is a mystery. Until next time, good night, everybody.